My father forced me to think, when there was problems to be solved, he would say, fix it or else. And that meant beg, borrow, steal, go to a library, use a phone book, do whatever you got to do, but you better fucking figure it out because it's going to hurt if you don't. So I learned to think on my feet and move quick. I started boxing at 12 because I hated my father so much. I knew I was going to have to defend myself and might even have to save somebody's life. So I got into martial arts and boxing at 12, and that later became very important in my life because that's what ultimately led to me becoming a holistic health practitioner, and that's how my career got started.
That was Paul Chek, and you're listening to The Regenerative Journey.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to The Regenerative Journey with your host, Charlie Arnott.
G'day, welcome back to The Regenerative Journey and welcome to this episode with Paul Chek. Big shout out to Perry Smith for lining up this interview with his network. I'd heard about Paul Chek some years ago. I have to say it was one of the most interesting interviews I have ever done. In listening to Paul's work, getting a sense of the enigma that he is, the amount of information that man stores in his head, the experience he has in applying that, the way he can bring together so many different modalities, anything from Steiner's work to remote viewing to you name it. Paul seems to have experience with or a really profound understanding of anything that we might put under the reasonably vague umbrella of spirituality, but not just spirituality, also mentality. Just intellect, and also as importantly the physical. He's so much experience in the brain, body, gut, mind connection. It's fascinating. So I interviewed Paul the morning after we'd actually arrived in LA in July last year. Drove 3 hours south to his beautiful little farm down there, up in the hills, and with his beautiful family. They've got fruit trees, orchard, pigs, goats, the whole thing. It's such a wonderful sanctuary. And again, I turned up there, and Paul had not met me before and didn't know anything about me really, but he was very, very, very willing, and I'm very grateful that Paul was able to spend as much time as he did. So we actually did it over 2 sessions. We did it the morning. First morning there in the States, and then the last day we had at the other end of the month in July. I drove back down there to actually interview Paul, but we ended up deciding we'd finish the interview. I started the month before, and I'll catch up with Paul another time for mine. And so again, very grateful for his time. Angie, who showed me around the vegetable garden, of the whole farm, really, it's just mind blowing. And then I did some work with her, some soul retrieval work, which is fascinating. Just check out Angie Chek online for her soul retrieval work. It's amazing. We did a virtual one. I was back in Australia probably in August the following year, September maybe, and she took me through a process of soul retrieval. It was beautiful. And also Penny, who's the bit of the powerhouse behind Paul's, I guess the tech he uses, his podcast, and does all the stuff behind the scenes. She's fantastic. We've been in touch with Penny since about helping us with our podcast. It was earlier this year. Absolute font of information, so helpful in helping me, who's a bit of a nunky with tech sometimes. We got there, couldn't get it onto the Wi-Fi, couldn't connect to this, couldn't connect to that. She just had pulled cords out of nowhere and plugged it all in. Didn't stop me from running out of batteries though. But anyway, we got through it. It was in 2 sessions in Paul's studio, or next door to his studio, in his sort of library essentially. I'm still, mind blown from the information that Paul. He had an answer for everything, and not in a smart-ass way at all. He just, again, the way he can bring all this beautiful information together into a very, very approachable, very understandable way. It's a real art and real credit to Paul the way he can do that. There was something else. Oh, Spirit Gym, actually, I think it was the day before the interview. He just launched Spirit Gym. So it's not so much now because it's a good 12 months or more old, his new platform for getting it, for, I guess, education and development, and Paul engaging with his wonderful community, which gets bigger and bigger. We also did this really cool thing when I was leaving on that second day I was down there. I did a video of Paul with his water purifying, energizing, organising structure he's built, which is basically a stone dome. He's put together with all sorts of different types of rock, volcanic, crystal, all sorts of things, and essentially what that does is it organises the water and purifies it. It's incredible. Drank some, took bottles of it home, and fascinating to hear Paul's journey into that realm. I mean, there's just so many different tangents we went down. But Paul, thank you very much, Angie, Penny and family. Just an honour and privilege to be sitting with you guys for so long. Thank you for being patient with me, with my tech issues and just timing of it all. And I really hope you all you wonderful listeners out there, enjoy this interview, fascinating interview with Paul Chek for the Regenerative Journey. Paul Chek, welcome to the Regenerative Journey, and welcome to your office, your podcast room. This is your office is next door. This is actually your your library.
This is what I would call part of my office.
That's just a little bit of it. It's your art studio.
Yeah.
It's your
podcast table right here. You're sitting where many amazing people have sat.
I know. Hopefully, well, who knows? Who knows how this lovely to be here.
Thank you.
I got here. We flew in this afternoon. Drove here this morning. Sat in a little diner just down the road there.
Yeah.
And had my first bottomless cup of coffee in America, just to get me through, given a very rough night last night.
Yeah.
Paul, and thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Yes, thank you. Glad to share.
As you said, you've been doing this for 40 years. You've done countless number of podcasts.
Yes.
So I appreciate the fact that you're willing to put some time into me.
Well, I personally, when Penny told me you were a farmer, I'm like, cool, because I think farmers are the most underappreciated, most important people on the planet, next to school teachers, and we need to rehabilitate a lot of both, But our future depends on the farmers, and I think they need to be made national heroes in every country if they're doing organic and biodynamic and regenerative farming. Otherwise, they're killing the planet. And I think we got to wrap our arms around the Waldorf school teachers, the Montessori school teachers, and rehabilitate the education system, because farming and education is the basis of our children's future. And without healthy kids, you're screwed. You got no tomorrow.
Well, they are our future, as they say. It's a cliche, but for a reason, though. Cliches are,
Sometimes
well-used expressions.
True is true, no matter how it comes, from poetry to prose.
And why here, Paul? You gave me a bit of a heads up there before when I arrived in terms of some financial imperatives to be here. It feels amazing. You said you took a couple of years to kind of settle on it.
It took us 5 years to find what we were looking for. Every place that had what we needed, space-wise, building-wise, resource-wise, was so far out of town there was no internet. We run our whole business worldwide on the internet. So this was the first place that we could barely afford. It was like pushing us to the limit, but we realized this is exactly what we were after. And it's where we want our kids to be. We wanted to have our own farm, and we wanted to have a pond stocked with fish, which we have. We wanted our own water source, which we put in. We wanted enough space to, live and breathe and not have neighbors looking through our windows. And we wanted to have a big gym and a classroom and a guest suite for people, because people come to see me from all over the world for various healing and life coaching and things like that. And we wanted a swimming pool because it's hot out here, and a sauna and a cold plunge. So whatever we didn't have, we put in. So we're on top of a mountain. We wanted beautiful views, and we got gorgeous views here. So knowing what we wanted, it narrowed it down a lot, to find a place 10 to 14 acres that has all that in one place. We've got 15,000 square foot of buildings here between the guest house, the gym, the classroom, and the main house. So to find all that in one spot in a configuration that actually works is quite hard to do. So 5 years later, like I was sharing with you, when we first saw this place in our first year of looking, it was $4 million. And that was, I'm 60, I'll be 63 in August. So I didn't want to have to keep working my ass off just to pay bills all the time. So I said to the girls, we got to find something that allows me, to not feel like I got a freaking elephant on my back every day. So by the time we sold our house, Angie sold her house, and we kind of pooled our money together, and I think we put $500,000 down. We ended up getting this place so that our mortgage payment on this property is actually no more than our 3/4 acre, 2,300 square foot house that we had in Vista. Now the maintenance to run this place is, more than most people pay for a mortgage on a big house, but it's still about the same as what we were paying, except we own it and we can do what we want with it. And it's, beautiful out here.
And the water, tell me about that, because not just the fact that it's amazing. You sunk a well when you got here. It's straight out of the mountain.
Yeah.
But you do some pretty cool stuff with it too.
Well, what I do is I build water chargers, which I've been doing since about 2006. My soul guided me, interestingly, out of the blue. I bought a pile of rocks from a guy that had done a bunch of land clearing and blasted the side of a mountain out to extend his orchard and build a huge workshop. So he gave me a great deal on one of these huge semi-truck load of boulders and, chunks of rock. And then I bought more from a landscape supplier because I love creating things out of stone, be they patterns on the ground or rock stacks or just, whatever. And so my soul just one day said to me, I'm going to teach you how to build a water charger so you can structure your water and make it a lot healthier for your body and for your family. And so I just went step by step. And I'll never forget the first time I tried it, I put a 5-gallon glass bottle of water in there because I was drinking the same Palomar Mountain water. So I was very used to it as it came from the distributor from the mountain. And when I pulled it out and tried it, it was close to a full moon. And the energy in the water was so high, it shocked me because it was literally bubbling on my tongue like carbonated water. I'm like, how in the world could that happen? And so I understand stones, but it was just such a shock to me that it worked so well. And it changed the water so much from already good water to just mind-blowingly good water. And then I began tracking it. And what I did is I even took tap water, just standard tap water, and I took some plastic bottles of water, like various brands of water, and I would do a comparison where I'd put one in the charger and one out, like a bottle of uncharged tap water on the side and then one in the charger, and I would see what it would do to these different waters, and it was just wild. One of the crazy experiences that I had in the beginning, which was quite shocking to me, I began noticing that each time I would take the water out and taste it, and it's in glass bottles, like, you have 5-gallon glass bottles with thick glass. And sometimes I would taste what tasted like nickel in it. And other times I would taste copper. And other times it would taste like dirt, like I was just drinking dirt water. And I'm like, how in the world is these metal flavors and these earth flavors coming through a glass bottle? And so it was quite perplexing. So I said, and I was asking this question one night because I was out at night taking it out when it was dark. And I just happened to take some out of the bottle and taste it. And I said to my soul, what in the world is going on? How is this happening? Because there's no way that this can be penetrating the glass bottle. And my soul turned my head and the moon was shining right on me. And I said, oh my God, it's the moon. And my soul said, yes, it's the effects of the moon, because the moon's resonating with the different minerals of the soil at different stages of the moon. So it's imprinting the energetic signature of the materials in the soil, whether it be the metals or the earth itself. And I started tracking it. I bought a moon calendar. And so I began specifically tasting it and recording the results and correlating it to what phase of the moon I was in. And I was just blown away at how powerful the effect of the moon was working through these stones into the water, and how the different stages of the moon creates a different resonance, which resonates with different minerals and metals in the earth. And the bottles are, of course, sitting right on the earth. And there's a bit of a science to the construction, but basically in a simple way to put it, I would couple what I would call a very yin stone. So what I did is I bought a bunch of black Hawaiian lava, because it's very, very black and very yin.
Is it high in iron? What is it?
No, it's not that. It's really the fact that it's a black stone. So because it's black and because of the construction of the minerals in it, yin, anything that's yin draws energy into its center and swells. So when a woman gets pregnant, the sperm meets the egg, and then inside of her body, you go through cell mitosis, and each cell doubles. So 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 8, 16, 16, 32. That happens 56 times, and you got a whole human body. So you're seeing that the woman's uterus is swelling from a central point outward. If you put a sponge in water, it draws water into itself and swells. That's yin energy. Okay, so a yin stone acts like a sponge, and it sucks light, it sucks energy, it sucks environmental energies into it, but it saturates, and just like a sponge will drip when it's oversaturated. So I couple that with a very yang stone, and I went and bought a bunch of Mexican crystals, which if you polish them up would look like a crystal you'd wear on your neck. But because they came right out of the ground, they were a lot cheaper. And I got some of them that are, 300 pounds. So a lot of these stones in my charger are 350, 300 plus pounds. And so I built a foundation where I go one black lava or other type of stone that's very yin. It pulls energy in, coupled with a yang, a crystal. And I have several different types of crystals, like Oro Verity, which is a green crystal, which harmonizes with the heart chakra. And so I would set these things up, and I got the idea from my studies of anatomy. The nodes of Ranvier function very much like that, where you get a positive negative polarity shift, and that causes energy to travel along a nerve. So I just was asking my soul, would you want me to do this? Would this work? And I had the idea based on how the nervous system works. And I know, because I've studied stones and stone formations for many, many years. I got piles of books on it, and I studied Philip Callahan's work and Victor Schauberger's work and Arden Anderson's work and many of the native tribal information on how they used water and stones. So I'd already had enough knowledge to know kind of what I was working with. But because crystals are piezoelectric, what happens when you start stacking stones on top of each other, the weight is pressing on the crystal, so it produces an electric charge, a piezoelectric charge. And so by the time you get a couple of tons of these things stacked on top of each other, when the sunlight hits it, then it gets sucked into the yin stones and pushed into the yang stones, so you get a pull, push. So it actually acts like a generator. And because it's built into a circle that progressively goes to a cone at the top, and then you'll see on the charger I built an antenna on the top out of pure crystal. So the top of it's highly positively charged. The earth is strongly negatively charged. So that sets up the polarity differential. Then you have a positive negative polarity alternating through the stones. And because they're in a circle, you have a circuit on top of a circuit on top of a circuit that goes from a large base with big stones to progressively smaller stones that are very negative on the ground to very positive at the top. So you got a differential between the ground and the top of the charger, and you got a differential between the stones and the levels, because each level comes in slightly, so you got a different type of resonance. So if you think of every stone like a musician in an orchestra, each stone affects the water in a unique way. If I change any stone, it changes the effects on the water. So what I used to do, for example, if I was working with someone who had something like leukemia, I would put a bunch of bloodstone into the charger and would imprint the water with the energy of a bloodstone, which is excellent for any kind of blood-based disease. If I had somebody, for example, that had cognitive difficulties, I could put amethyst or anything that helps resonate with the brain better, and that would affect the water. So I custom built the whole water charger, just letting my soul guide me, and I bought $10,000 worth of stones, additional to probably, about 500 stones are in the charger. So the first 250 were stones that I had collected from around the property that I'd already collected from my other properties, and I had them shipped over here. It took me 3 months to build it because it's such hard manual labor, because I have to hold these big stones by hand while my gardener and handyman spreads the mud, the cement, because if you just drop the stone, it'll just slide off because the mud acts like a lubricant. So I had to hand hold each of these things. And sometimes I'd have to sit there for 2 or 3 minutes till the cement would set up enough that when I let go of the stone, it wouldn't just fall down. And I have to build it on a slight angle so that it cones up. Yeah. So I could only do about 90 minutes before I was physically just exhausted. And I didn't go to the gym for 3 months. Every day I just went out, and me and Freddie just worked and worked. And we built a beautiful stone floor inside that's anchored right to the ground. And we put drainage underneath it so that water wouldn't pool up there, because we get heavy rains here in the wintertime. And so by the time I got to the top, it's big enough I can put about 70, probably 75-gallon water bottles. I can get 20 people in there. And I use it as a toning chamber as well. So as the sun and the moon changes, it affects the energy of the water charger. And because you've got probably, I would guess, 12 to 15 tons of stone in there, so the crystals in the bottom are getting a lot of pressure on them. And as the environment fluctuates and the earth goes through its fluctuations, it's causing that. I mean, I can hook you. I'll let you touch it. You'll see it feels like a giant heartbeat going through. And so it's spinning the water molecules at the molecular level, programming the information of the sun, the moon, the stars, and the local environment right into the water. So it structures it. But what it does is it puts you into a real-time resonance with the earth, the sun, the moon, and the stars. I mean, every photon that's reaching this water charger from anywhere in the cosmos is going into that water. So you're actually drinking something that would be the equivalent of being out in nature and drinking out of a stream. Except now I can take super clean water, bottle it so I can put it in the house in glass bottles to keep it pure, and I can keep the same charge going into it that it would be getting out in nature, coming from an artesian well, for example. But I can keep that water very vital and very alive. And as we were discussing before the podcast, I can also take water at select phases of the moon. For example, if someone has a lot of toxicity, I can give them new moon water. And new moon water is very, very empty, so it acts like distilled water, even though it's got lots of minerals in it. And when you drink it, it feels like it's going right through your tongue. It literally feels like it's penetrating right through your tissues. And full moon water, for example, somebody who's depressed or has chronic fatigue, has so much energy in it from the full moon, it's literally like the opposite polarity. Now, if you gave that water to someone that was manic or hyper, it would probably be quite stimulating to them. But interestingly, I have biogeometry set up throughout the house to basically take all the electromagnetic frequencies and turn them into the frequency called BG3, which is biogeometry green. It's a negative green, which Dr. Kareem traveled the world to all the major healing sites and famous water sources, and he found that they were all emitting the same BG3 frequency. So he developed technology that can take any signal of any type, from Wi-Fi to 5G to electromagnetic pollution coming through the walls, and it neutralizes it at this BG3 frequency. So the interesting thing that happened is when I started bringing my water inside the house, I noticed that it was much harder to feel the moon cycles in it. And I talked to him about that. I said, it's flattening the water out. He said, no, it's not actually flattening it. It's nesting it inside. He said, so the same frequencies are there, but they're being nested in a BG3 wave.
Wow.
So now you're not only getting the benefits of the moon cycle, but you're also getting the healing benefits of the BG3 energy. And the BG3 will take any frequency that's too high and bring it down, and any frequency that's too low and bring it up. So it produces this very, very smooth, neutral frequency that's very healing to the body.
And people drink city tap water,
which is dead water. It's what is classically called bulk water. It's unstructured. It's been sitting for God knows how long in straight pipes.
In God knows what's in those pipes.
A lot of water, goes through sewage treatment centers. So there are people who are drinking water that was somebody else's piss and shit a couple of days ago.
Does LA do that?
LA, all the major cities
Really?
do. Oh, hell yeah.
Not that I drink tap water.
Yeah, no, yeah. Almost every major city's got sewage treatment centers, and they take the water, filter it, and put it right back into the city water systems. So you're drinking residues of everybody's medical drugs and every damn thing going through them.
Paul, I have so many questions just about water.
All right, go for it.
No, well, what I want to do is, as is the name of my podcast, The Regenerative Journey. It's about your regenerative journey.
Sure. Well,
So
you can come back.
Can we talk about?
Your camera disappeared, just so you know.
Yeah, no, thank you. It does that just because it just times out. I'll have to sort that out. It's still running though. Paul, let's get to your life, because what I find fascinating about all my guests is their life and their journey, their highs, their lows, the challenges, and which are always
it's a long story.
I know, well, that's it, and we've only got limited time, I understand, so we might have to pick it up at some other time and some other place. But can we just go back to let's cover as much as we can.
Yeah,
in the time we have, and then if we go if we depart your journey and head into a direction, that's absolutely fine. Because given your background and your vast knowledge, and just looking at your library back here, it's just there's so much that I'd love to ask you. But let's start day one. Where did Paul Chek turn up in the world?
I was born in Los Angeles, August the 24th, 1961 at 6:05 a.m. and born in the same hospital my father was, and I think my grandfather too. And my mother had me when she just turned 16. My father was a competitive dancer and a professional drag racer. And he ended up running away with dance partners and leaving my mom. And so by the time my mother was 18, she had 3 kids, and he took off and left her. And my father drowned when I was 8. And my mother remarried to a man that used to be a special and work in the special effects department for the Hollywood, for Universal Studios. And he had a degree in agriculture. So my parents decided they wanted to leave LA. And we moved to Idaho. We had a pig farm for 3 years. Then they decided they wanted to immigrate to Canada and specialize in the production of black wool. So my father began selectively buying rams and ewes that were known to produce black offspring, because there's a huge woolen trade amongst the Haida Indians for the tourist industry on Vancouver Island. So my parents went through what was called the homesteading program. They applied to be landed immigrants. They got accepted. We moved from Fruitland, Idaho to Cottage Grove, Oregon, where we had a sheep farm for a little, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so. And my father continued selectively buying rams and ewes that had a high incidence of producing black offspring. And we immigrated to Canada with a whole cattle truck full of these carefully selected animals. And my parents bought a 142-acre farm on Vancouver Island in the middle of the island in Courtenay, British Columbia. And we raised sheep. My father bought a woolen mill, and we filled an entire large barn with a woolen factory. So we had around 100 to 120 sheep at different times at any given time. We had horses, pigs, chickens, cows. We milked our own cows, goats. We raised and sold produce. We sold firewood. So we had a fully functional, we had horses. I rode in the rodeo as a kid. I raced motocross when I was young and was sponsored by Honda. I raced stock cars. I drag raced. I became a father when I just turned 18. I left school when I did about a month of the 10th grade and couldn't take it anymore because they would never answer my questions. So I'm like, what the fuck? Why bother? And then I became a father, so I had to go out into the work world. So I took my knowledge of being on the farm, and my father was just a slave driver of a man. He had no concept of a child. So from the time I could reach the pedals on the tractor when I was 8 years old, we all were tasked with adult responsibilities. And so it was like a lot of hard work.
Was that a happy time?
No. My father was unfortunately a very, very violent man and a lot of trauma. My brother committed suicide. And, not a pretty picture at all. Put me into all of us were in a survival crisis. A lot of PTSD would be the way to put it. But I learned a lot, and he made me tough.
What were some of the lessons that, or I guess it was a survival lessons, was it?
It was just, like there was just no concept of a child. I mean, my dad's rule was the animals eat before you eat. And if you ever got caught forgetting or not feeding or watering animals or doing your chores, you would get the shit beat out of you. And there was hospital visits involved and broken bones and things that I won't even say because it would hurt people even to hear them. It was like being in a prison camp, really. But, I learned how to work hard. My father forced me to think, when there was problems to be solved, he would say, fix it or else. And that meant beg, borrow, steal, go to a library, use a phone book, do whatever you got to do, but you better fucking figure it out because it's going to hurt if you don't. So I learned to think on my feet and move quick. And I started boxing at 12 because I hated my father so much. I knew I was going to have to defend myself and might even have to save somebody's life. So I got into martial arts and boxing at 12, and that later became very important in my life because that's what ultimately led to me becoming a holistic health practitioner, and that's how my career got started. So when I left home at 16, I went to work full-time, did all sorts of different jobs. Paul Jr. came when I had just turned 18. But then there was a crisis of a lack of work on Vancouver Island due to an economic downturn. The unemployment rates were approaching, I think they're 18%. And the logging camps had all shut down, which was the main industry. And I worked in the logging industry and the water well and exploration drilling industry at the time. But what happened was the Japanese had been buying up massive amounts of wood from the logging companies on Vancouver Island. And what we didn't know is that they were saving it, and they had such more efficient milling systems that they could mill that wood and sail it back at way less cost. So all of a sudden, the entire lumber market was flooded with all this Japanese lumber that was excellent quality, but way cheaper. So nobody was buying lumber anymore. So the whole logging industry went into a complete collapse, which then took everything with it because that was the main industry. So being an American citizen, I said, well, I got to do something. I can't starve. I got to feed my family. And I had a friend who had left to Florida and got work on a fishing boat. And I just, out of the blue, said, I got to call him and see if there's any work down there. He said, Paul, you could get a work down here, no problem. So I sold my race car, sold my spare engine, sold $30,000 worth of tools and stuff I'd collected in my racing and mechanic career and took everything and got a job in 2 hours working on a fishing boat in Florida, and then moved my family to Marathon, Florida, in the Florida Keys. The fishing industry turned out to be a ripoff. The way they run it there is they just screw the hand. So I found after the first 6 months, I was basically working for $2.50 an hour. I'm like, this is bullshit, and it's hard fucking work. So then I went to work as a marine mechanic because I was trained as a mechanic. I went to trade school when I was young in Canada because they had a program that you could get government support. So when I was 18, I went through trade school to get my certificate in automotive and industrial repair. So I had all these skills as a mechanic. Plus I was racing cars and motorcycles when I was young. So I knew a lot about mechanical work. And so I went to work. Fortunately, there was a great big huge marina right next to, I bought a trailer there in a trailer park, like a 35-foot trailer when I moved there. And so I literally walked across the street, right across the fence. And I worked for this guy who owned this huge marina called Bonefish Harbor Marina. But I got so sick of working in the bilges of boats, and just the smell of rotten fish and hot and sweaty in the Florida Keys and engines running in tight spaces. I can't fucking do this. I got to get out of here. And the guy that owned the marina was a fighter pilot in Vietnam. And one day I got a card in the mail that said, Uncle Sam wants you. And it was an invitation to go take the testing to enter the military. So I went to him and said, what do you think of this? And he said, Paul, the secret is see how you do on your entrance exams and then ask them what is the school that would be the longest that costs the government the most to pay for, because that will determine how much you're worth when you get out. So that's exactly what I did. I could only qualify to go in the Army because I didn't have a high school diploma. They were the only one that would take me. And I scored so high on the entrance exams, they said, if you go to school for 2 years and get an associate's degree, we will train you as a pilot. And I said, I'm not fucking going to go to school for 2 years. I hate school. What's the best job you can give me that costs you the most money to train me? And it turned out to be what's called a 68J1P, which is a year of electronics school to learn how to repair weapon systems on Cobra helicopters. Then you're trained as the co-pilot, as the gunner. So if the co-pilot gets killed, you have to go run the weapon systems because you're the expert on weapon systems. So I joined the military, went through all the basic training, went to school for a year in electronics. Then I went to my training to be a paratrooper, and my battle plan was, if I don't like electronics, because I'd already done a fair bit of electronics work, and I knew it wasn't my favorite thing because I worked on car electronics and various other systems, homes and everything like that. But I knew when I went in, I said to the recruiter, what do people get paid when they leave the Army with this training? And that was 83 when I went in. He said, right now, Bell Helicopter is hiring from the United States military and paying them $89,000 a year starting pay. Shit. Well, that's about $180,000 a year right now. So I said, I'm going to do it then, because I wanted to have a good future. My parents always had money problems, so I did not want my life to be limited by money problems. So I made a promise to myself I would do whatever I had to do to make enough money that it wasn't a problem, so I could live the way I wanted to live and have the toys I wanted to have and let my kids have a life that wasn't like I grew up. We could only wash our clothes once a week. My friends used to laugh at me because I always came to school with cow shit on my pants, and we had water problems because the neighbor drilled a well and we couldn't get water because they sucked our well. It was just so we could only wash clothes once in a while. Parents didn't have a lot of money. They just barely were making it by with the farm and everything else. And so I said, I'm going for it, but I knew inside of myself I may not like electronics. So I said, I got to come up with plan B. And as a kid, I used to watch Wide World of Sports, and I used to see the Army boxing team fighting on Wide World of Sports. And I said, aha, they're centered in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So I said to the recruiter, what do I have to do to get to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, in case I want to join the Army boxing team? Thank you. And he said, you got to become a paratrooper. I said, no problem. And my stepfather was a smoke jumper in the fire department, so I already kind of had a sense of what parachuting was all about. And so I did. I ended up at 82nd Airborne Division, and sure enough, I hated the electronics work because once I graduated from school at the top of my friggin' class with a 97 point something grade average after 40 some odd tests, once you get to your unit, they only let you do things by rank. And so all I got to do was take access panels off. So I spent a year learning how to work on every part of this helicopter, and now I'm the low man on the totem pole, so I'm a Phillips screwdriver technician. And I'm a guy that can build fucking race cars from the ground up. I'm like, I can't handle this. And they hardly ever exercised. And I'm like, I got to get out of here. So long story made short, the only way you can get on the Army boxing team, which at that time was the third ranked boxing amateur team in the world, is to beat somebody on the team. So I scheduled a tryout. I went down, I took out one of their welterweights in the second round, and I became a fighter on the boxing team. And I also represented the Army in triathlon. So I was fighting on the boxing team while also representing the Army in triathlon. And I won the Army triathlon and was the Army's representative in 1986 at Hilton Head, South Carolina for the USTS National Championships. And then my company commander said, Paul, I'm betting a lot of money on you. So if you want to stop boxing and just keep winning all these military competitions, you don't have to box anymore. And so I went and told the boxing team I was leaving to train for triathlon full time. And they said, don't do that. We'll give you the job as the trainer because you're the only guy that can fight hard from bell to bell. And we need our guys because they keep running out of energy. Well, they're doing a lot of stupid shit I won't go into. But so I took the job as the trainer and worked with an osteopathic physician who was the team doctor, implemented the first sports massage therapy program in the whole Army, took over their nutrition program, which I'd learned from my grandfather and my mother and studying. And our boxing team became the most successful it had ever been. And I then was the trainer of the United States international team, which is the best fighters from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. And out of my boxing team, in the 1988 Olympics, all of them had to fight their way onto the Olympic team. 11 of my boxers made it to the Olympics in 88.
11 of 12, wasn't it?
11 of 12,
Yeah.
yep. Oh. And so when it came time to get out of the Army, I surveyed the whole world for the best place to go study sports massage therapy because I wanted to mix athletic training, weightlifting, postural correction, and sports massage therapy to help athletes perform better. And it turned out the best school that I could find anywhere in the world was right here in Encinitas, California. So I moved out of North Carolina to here, went to sports massage therapy training, continued my training, became a holistic health practitioner in the state of California, which is a license you can get, which just takes more training. And I built my practice and I never looked back.
How much of that, those years of your experience there, would you say was intuition or kind of your innate knowing, or as opposed to training, school, working it out?
My mother joined the Self-Realization Fellowship when I was 12, which was the greatest thing that ever happened to me because prior to that she was in Christian Science, and I had a tremendous disdain for Christianity as a child because one, it was very scary, and two, they would never answer my questions, and three, I could not reconcile a God that's supposed to love you but will burn you in hell for almost anything. And so I got really nervous that adults were so gullible that they believed in this shit. And I knew something was wrong when they wouldn't answer my questions. They would just tell me to stop talking, or you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, you're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk, or children should be silent and shit like that, which just pissed me off as a kid. I just like, well, this is crazy. Why will no one answer my questions? But when my mother joined the Self-Realization Fellowship, which is the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, the monks were unbelievably wise and loving, and they answered all my questions. And I learned to meditate, and I learned a whole bunch of stuff. And I found that the Eastern approach to religion was just radically way more healthy and free and loving and God-like than any of the Abrahamic religions. And it was a shock to me. I'm like, why would anybody go to a Christian church or a Jewish temple or study the Islamic faith when you've got Hinduism. It's just mind-blowingly better. And so then I went to summer camp with the monks.
And your age what? About
I was 12 at that time, so I began a regular meditation practice, and I started having a lot of wild spiritual experiences. And due to the stress in my life at 12, I started having what first was quite scary. I started having out-of-body experiences where I would be laying in bed and all of a sudden I'd be floating out of my body. And I learned to control it. And I started going around the farm in my astral body, which I call my light body, and I would purposely go see if I could find things, and then I would get up in the morning and go check to see if they were there, and I realized I wasn't going crazy, and I was afraid to tell my parents because, God knows what would happen. And so every single time, whatever I found, even sometimes, quarter of a mile out in the woods, I'd find a chainsaw my dad left out there while he was cutting trees down. And so I realized somehow I'm able to actually leave my body and be conscious and objectively identify things, which made me realize that I was much more than my body. And then I spent a lot of time with the monks. And when I was 15, I went to summer camp, and then I went deeper into my training with the monks. And that stabilized me a lot, helped me get over a lot of my childhood pain and things that I hadn't resolved in me that were quite bad traumas. And then jumping forward to the year 2000, I was already quite successful in my profession. And there was a conference being held in London called The Field, put on by Lynn McTaggart. And Edgar Mitchell was the keynote speaker, but they offered a one-day course in remote viewing by the director of remote viewing for the CIA. And so I said, I got to go there because I got to see if I am good at remote viewing, because I intuitively felt what I was doing was actually remote viewing since I was a kid. So there was 750 people in the training program. It was in a huge auditorium. And two of my instructors were with me that were working for me at the time. And the way they would do it is they would put a picture in an envelope that you couldn't see up on a bulletin board, and you had to use the techniques that they were teaching you and then draw a picture of what was in the envelope, and then they would unveil the picture on a big screen so you could compare your drawing. Well, the first thing I realized, I didn't like their technique because I intuitively sensed that wasn't nearly as good as what I had learned from just my experience. And my instructors kept going, what the hell, how are you? Because I was drawing exactly what was in the envelopes. So at the end, they had a contest. And basically the instructor said, tell me what happened to me on July such and such date at this time. And so I just asked my soul, take me to that time and place in his life. And I found myself hovering in my light body, my spirit body, outside of a large glass building, like a giant corporate type building. And then I was drawn to the window and I looked through and I saw him on a gurney with all sorts of equipment hooked to him and doctors and nurses moving very quickly. And I realized he was having some kind of a medical emergency. And I could see that they were monitoring his heart and they were moving fast. Like you could tell it was like an emergency situation. So I'm like, I knew intuitively I was going to win the contest. And so I waited and waited till everybody told him he was in caves with dragons and all sorts of silly shit. And so he said, okay, who thinks they know? And I jumped up. He said, you, the soldier looking guy in the back. And I said, at that time, on that day, I saw you in a large glass building, which I later realized was a hospital, and you were hooked up to a lot of emergency sensors. I saw them monitoring your heart. I saw them injecting you, and I saw them moving very quickly like they were preparing you for surgery. And he turned white. He literally was shocked. He didn't think anyone was going to get it. And so he didn't say that I'd won. So I had to listen to people say all this crazy shit for 2 hours. And finally he says, you, the soldier guy at the back, you're the winner. And then he said, I had a heart attack and I was going into emergency heart surgery. And so since then I've actually found three different times. I've found people that were lost and nobody could find, including the National Guard, for people that got a hold of me. And so the reason I'm telling you that is because throughout my life, I've always had this inner sense of connection to my soul, which is God within you, consciousness within you. And so I've just followed that inner guide, and that's how I invented so many things. That's how I figured out how to build water chargers. That's how I knew to bring the Swiss ball to the exercise industry. That's how I built the primal pattern system. I've always specialized in challenge cases. So the way I built my business in San Diego is I just went to doctors and therapists all over the place and said, send me the toughest patients you got. And there's nothing to lose if I don't make progress with them, because you're not making progress with them anyhow. And I offered to do evaluations for any doctor or any of their medical staff for free, and their first program for free. So in no time, I had a huge practice full of doctors and their wives and their children. And basically, I got complicated cases. So I just used my training for meditation and calming myself, and I would connect to the soul of the individual and ask it to guide me. And I would find out all sorts of stuff about people that nobody had ever looked into. And I became extremely successful at dealing with medical failures. And I had athletes coming to see me from all over the world that, no one can figure out. I brought 3 of the world's greatest athletes out of medical retirement, including one of your own, Ricky Stewart. He was forced into medical retirement, and the Canberra Raiders begged me to see if I could do anything with him. I brought him out, and he played 5 more seasons after that. I brought Gary Roberts out of medical retirement when he was forced into retirement by the Calgary Flames surgeons. And I brought one of the best horse racers in the world out of retirement, Richard Dunwoody, who had 40 bad falls racing horses. And he lost all the muscles in his left arm. He had a severe nerve injury and neck pathology that nobody could figure out. And after I rehabbed him and reconditioned him, he went back and won the Triple Crown and wrote about me in his autobiography. And there's a picture he sent me in the gym there. If you can see it in there. And so I basically started the Chek Institute in 1995 because so many of the elite doctors and therapists were saying, people really need to learn what it is you do because nobody thinks this way. And so I was integrating diet, lifestyle, mental, emotional, posture, corrective exercise, clinical massage therapy. I'd also gotten trained in neuromuscular therapy, so I went through all their training to become a clinical massage therapist as well, which is very detailed work. And so I mixed all these together, and that was really what the Chek Institute was based on. And I just traveled all over the world looking for the best doctors and therapists at key things that I thought I needed to know based on what kept coming at me with patients. So if I had a lot of neurological problems, I would go study the experts on these problems. If there was a lot of spinal pathology, I studied that. I did 5 cadaver dissections at various universities. And I just made a life of, I've collected all these books in 41 years. And
how many are there? 5,000.
There's over 5,000. And I've probably studied 2,000 of them cover to cover, and hundreds more as select research reference material. And so the answer to your question, in a long way of saying it, is I've always had this inner sense since I learned from the monks how to meditate and how to trust my inner self. Later, I learned that was my soul and made contact with my own soul. And then I realized what the soul was and how to work with it. And I've been perfecting that for many years, and now I teach training programs on that, which is a lot of what I do in my new Spirit Gym program, is teach people how to get guided from their inner self. And that's helped me with, I'm an inventor. I've got multiple patents. I've invented lots of things. I invented calibrated instruments for orthopedic assessment. I invented a hydrotherapy device for correcting muscle imbalances in legs. I invented another device for measuring structural changes in the body, because there's measurements that nobody was taking that I needed to do proper rehabilitation. Yeah, so my program's multidisciplinary. So I got doctors of every kind, therapists of every kind, trainers, strength coaches, massage therapists, and we've had over 63,000 people come through the Institute since I started it in 95.
Just going back to your assessments before, you were saying that you would, correct me if I'm wrong, essentially get in touch with your patient's soul.
Yeah.
And then was, the body keeps the score, the soul that you connect with, their soul, was it telling you what because it already knew, it just the mental state, the physical state didn't know how to do it, though the body did, and you were just like the conduit to say, hey, you spoke the language.
I was talking to their body, which is the subconscious mind, but I was really connecting to the soul because I have a very comprehensive system of assessment. I mean, I've got some of the top doctors in the world that have studied with me. The director of my education system, Matthew Walden, is an osteopathic physician, a naturopathic physician, and a super smart guy, famous for his journal articles. He's an editor for the Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapy. He studied with me for 27 years. So the people that were coming to me, a lot of them very elite athletes, had such complicated cases. Some of them had 30 or 40 significant things wrong with them at once. So with people not having millions of dollars to go see 40 doctors at once, and knowing that their cases were too complex to simply be physical issues alone, I learned that the best way to take the data that I'd gathered and figure out what was the real etiology behind this was to connect to that person's soul. And oftentimes I would have visions of them being traumatized as children, or them hurting other people and holding that pain inside of them. But the number one most common problem, believe it or not, that I found consistently was beliefs about God that were actually pitting them up against their own instincts and their own sense of freedom, and causing them to do things like stay in marriages that they've been unhappy in for 20 years because they believed that till death do you part. So I found the majority of what was actually causing people's illnesses and diseases and chronic structural pain was these root beliefs that led to behaviors and choices that were ultimately causing them to have a lot of addictions to medicate the stress of not being able to heal their belief system or their trauma. And so I studied world religion extensively. I studied philosophy. I studied psychology. I've been studying Jung's work for 30 plus years, 35 years. Same with Steiner. I studied Steiner extensively. I studied Wilbur extensively. I studied Hazrat Inyat Khan, a Sufi master. I studied many of the greatest mystics, healers, teachers, therapists, and doctors. And I developed a very deep understanding of mysticism and religion and world religion. I studied all of Houston Smith's work, who is considered to be the greatest expert of world religion that ever lived. And through my own work, my own spiritual practices, my own work with plant medicines, I was trained to use plant medicines therapeutically. And I've conducted probably 1,000 healing ceremonies with plant medicines in my career, and done many, many very deep shamanic journeys where I was able to have deep spiritual experiences and get answers to really deep questions. And so what that gave me the ability to do was I had a structure and a system of how the psyche grows and develops, and what happens when one's traumatized, or what happens when one has a belief system that's limiting them. And I have a deep understanding of the spirit and soul, so I'm able to sense and speak to the soul, find out what they're here to do, but why they're not doing it. And whenever the soul is not doing what it came to the world to do, it creates tremendous stress inside of them that often produces a neurosis, because the patient feels a deep sense of they're going in the wrong direction, and that life is not meaningful for them, which leads to a lot of addictions and a lot of emotional pain that gets projected out in relationships and leads to a lot of trauma in relationships, and a lot of broken marriages and divorces, and kids being left alone and isolated because parents can't get along. And so I was actually able consistently to identify what was the real issue that was leading to the eating disorder or to the irritable bowel syndrome or the chronic low back pain or the visual disorder or the heart condition or the burned out adrenal glands or the combination of 20 of these things at once, and guide people and help them by becoming a translator for them and showing them, for example, that you cannot read the Bible literally and understand it. It's impossible to do. You have to have a depth of knowledge of the language of the culture, the meaning of those words at that time, the symbology. And so I would actually show them what these beliefs of theirs really meant, which would be very shocking. And then I would pull out books by mystics from their own religions and say, okay, let me show you what Meister Eckhart has to say about, let's show you what Giordano Bruno has to say. Let me show you what St. Hildegard of Bingen had to say about these issues. And when you see what the most enlightened people from that religion, it's night and day. And people would realize they've been living a confused interpretation of religious ideas programmed into them by very unenlightened people that gave them a very scary view of God. And to the degree your ideas about God put you out of touch with love, your life will be very painful to live, because you're going to have all these beliefs that you think God wants and is and demands of you, when really it's not true at all. So over the course of my career, my orientation went from physical training and high performance training and acute injury rehab to a deep study of psychology and philosophy and religion and world religion and mysticism and shamanism. And I used my abilities to communicate with the soul to say what's really going on. And oftentimes I would see very traumatic wounds in childhood. And unfortunately, I probably have had over 50 clients that were sexually abused by Christian pastors, preachers, and priests. So I would see this in their energy field, and their soul would say, this person's suffering from this sexual trauma that's never been healed. And they'd often been afraid to say anything about it. And when they did, they often got ridiculed and punished even by their parents for talking about it. Now, I could tell you 1,000 things that I've identified in people. But in essence, what a Chek professional is trained to do is to really get to the core of what's going on, and then have enough knowledge of these things to help you have a much broader perspective of the belief that you're acting out, usually unconsciously, because most of these things are programmed into children before they even have any ego to have any discernment. But they act in the unconscious. So this is why Jung says your unconscious will continue to meet you on the outside in the events of your life until you meet your unconscious on the inside, and you will call it fate. And that's exactly what I was dealing with. A lot of people that were fated by the pain and confusion in their unconscious mind, guiding and directing their life from behind the scenes, but not realizing it. They were just basically externalizing beliefs that were programmed into them by other people that were very unenlightened.
So they had a story. They basically created a story based on their experience, whether it's in church. I mean, I guess a lot of, for those who weren't exposed to a religion, they still were exposed
It's
to
all the same.
The home environment, the school environment, whatever the.
Not only that, look, there's two things I'll say to you there. We live in a Christian culture, so I don't care if you're an atheist or an agnostic. You're being programmed into Christianity everywhere you go. All you got to do is look at the names of the streets, the names of the holidays. You're swimming in a Christian culture. So someone who tries to tell me that they're not affected by Christianity is like a fish trying to tell me that it's not wet. And I go, oh yeah, just give me 5 minutes with you. I'll ask you a few key questions. And then the other issue is, and Jung pointed this out better than anybody, when he addressed the issue of atheism, he said something profound. He said, for something to be rejected, it must first be real. So what I did is I studied atheism, and I found a number of studies by psychologists, and what they showed, the most common denominator amongst atheists is a traumatic relationship with their father. So now all you got to do is go look at the Christian God, and it is a very traumatic father figure. So their unconscious rejection of God is the rejection of a abusive father figure. But no one on this planet does not come with the urge to figure out who they are and what they are and how they got here. The problem is they end up turning to materialism because it's the only thing they have left. But you can never make sense of life from a materialistic viewpoint because, quite simply, matter cannot organize itself. I say, how long do you have to stand next to a pile of rocks before a Rolex watch, a toaster, or a BMW jumps out of it? Well, longer than God has. So in alchemy, they show you that the fire and the air elements are volatile, and the earth and the water elements are passive. If you go into Steiner's teaching, the fire element and the air element is the domain of Lucifer, and the water and earth elements are the domain of Ahriman, and Christ is the mediating force between them. So we've all got these three forces inside of us, and really the spiritual path is learning to identify the Ahrimanic influence or the materialistic influence with the Luciferic influence, the desire to create illusions and get out of the world, with the Christ impulse, which says you need to use the Luciferic influence and the Ahrimanic influence in a balanced way because they're basically forces in the psyche. But if you don't know how to manage them, they will take you over and your life will be exactly what you see in the world right now.
And if you can get that balance, you stand in your I am.
You stand in your I am, and you know you're a conscious co-creator with God, and you're a citizen of the universe, and that you have ultimate sovereignty, and there's nothing to be afraid about with death because we all die, and we've died many, many, many times. Yogananda says it takes about 6 billion reincarnations through the kingdom of nature to get your first human body. He says there's about 60 billion souls at any given time waiting for a human body. And if you knew how fortunate you were to have one, you'd be dancing in the streets. So we all have an unconscious knowledge of the truth, but it takes real spiritual development to kind of awaken to the truth of yourself and to heal the broken parts of yourself that are limiting your perception because the wounds distort the lens of perception. And so that's the human journey, and the point I'm making is you can't resolve the paradox of reality as an atheist because you get to matter and you're stuck. And you can't even do it with Big Bang cosmology because you have to say, well, where did the Big Bang come from? So you end up at an impasse. And so having studied cosmology for years, as I show in my new Spirit Gym book series, when I did my research, there were 37 theories of everything, and not one of them is more objectively valid than the other one because none of them can say where did the energy and the information come from to create the cosmos that they have in their theory. So ultimately what you see is mythology, religion, and science are all on equal footing. The difference is the scientists convince you that they're right and it's objective. The religious people say, well, science is wrong, but they can't prove their origins either. So we're all in this beautiful, mystical, mysterious place called myth. And so what is a myth? It's a story that tells itself. And here we all are. And the problem is you're going to live your story out. And if you don't learn how to edit it and get clear on what you want, you're going to be somebody's patient or you're going to be dead.
Tell me, and doing Spirit Gym, which I want to get to, is a way, I'm sure, for one to connect with one's soul. Is there without giving it all away, is there a way?
You could never give it all away. If you knew how much, it's a 15-volume set of books. It's 3,000 pages. And there's about 60 hours of training I've already filmed it for the members when they sign up that would take you probably a year to do the training and the lessons that I've built. Plus I do weekly I do a weekly presentation, so I guide people one at a time through the lesson so they can ask me questions. And I take anybody in the membership that wants help with anything in their life, from building their career to healing their diseases to giving over relationship problems. I mean, that's what I've been doing for 41 years. So I'm just there to support them in actually getting to the root causes and learning how to use their mind and their creative abilities and have, a healthy intuition and a real relationship with their soul, so that they actually become a whole individuated human being and not just a programmed robot that's acting out everybody else's belief systems and medicating their fears and their pains for lack of any other option.
Well, I guess the good news is it's actually possible, yeah?
Oh, totally possible, yeah. I mean, I've had to heal a lot of stuff in my life. My brother committed suicide, my dad drowned, I had lots of trauma from my father, seeing my family abused and hurt badly. My sister's son drowned when he was 3. I've lost my grandparents that I loved, multiple of them. I've had a lot of bad traumas myself. I was in a coma for 2 days in a motocross racing accident. I've had many, many broken bones racing motocross, and I got broken bones all through my body from all my stunt events on motorcycles and every other thing. So I've had a lot of physical trauma. I've had a lot of emotional and mental trauma. I've been through a divorce. My first son's 43 years old now, and I got a grandson that's 3 with him, and I got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and monogamy didn't work for me. So after my first marriage ended after 17 years, I promised myself no more of that. So I asked Great Spirit, prayed every day for a year and a half to bring me a partner that would let me be me and support me in my life mission. And that was Penny. And we've been married for 28 years now. I met Penny in Canberra, Australia, and 4 days later we were engaged to get married. And we've been married for 28 years. Then I met Angie, and she joined me and Penny as a family 13 years ago. And so Angie directs the nutrition and lifestyle coaching department. Angie's got a degree in nutrition. She's got a degree in energy medicine. She's got a degree in biology. She did 3 years of advanced training with Michael Harner, one of the top shaman in the world, who runs he died now, but Angie was in his last class before he died, but he founded the Institute for Shamanic Studies in San Francisco. Penny's got 3 master's degrees. She's got a master's in biological anthropology from Cambridge, a master's in exercise and sports science from Colorado State, a master's in business from Colorado State, and she's a pilot. And so
she's a master of keeping you in line too, yeah?
Yeah. Well, she supports me very well, and she supports Angie. So all of us really have a very integral mission, and we're all the kind of the driving force behind the Chek Institute. And so our lives have been devoted to doing our best to bring good education to people and to help people heal and grow together and work through our own challenges together, like everybody has to. But we've always done very, very well. And point is I created the life that I wanted to live, because I don't believe in limitations imposed upon you by other people. Unless you buy into that with your heart and say, that's the way I want to live, that's fine. But what I find is very few people are actually living true to their authentic self. And that is a great way to have a life of a lot of chronic health problems. And so I learned early, be true to your own self, or you can't be true to anybody else. And so I devoted my life to being honest with myself and following my own path. I developed my own system of education, my own system of healing. And I created freedom for myself at any cost. And I pioneered a lot of things, and I've been attacked repeatedly in my career. But because I had a very good system of analysis and an objective assessment, and I measured everything, I didn't care. I've been in debates all over the world. I've never lost a single debate because I can prove what I teach. And I've done it over and over and over again.
What do the conventional doctors think of Paul Chek?
It depends. If they're awake, they think it's obvious, and they go, shit, why didn't I think of that? And if they're not awake, well, then they just come at me with all their studies and bullshit, but I just dissect that easily. I mean, I know a lot about science. I've helped design scientific studies. Inventions of mine have been used in scientific studies. I've written journals in major research, written articles in journals, in major research journals. I've published, I wrote a chapter called Posture and Craniofacial Pain in a medical book on head pain. You know, I can back what I say very, very well.
There's 5,000 books there that probably help you. What is just conscious of the time, Paul?
Yeah, we got about 15 minutes.
What's the craziest experience you've had with a patient? You know, or maybe it's not with a patient, just yourself, in terms of unexpected, scary, off the charts, cosmic.
Well,
I know I did listen to one about some puppets, a bunny, like it was a rabbit, and you had to help get rid of out of a possession. There was
that was a patient from Australia, actually. But that wasn't even close to the scariest or the craziest. I've seen some crazy shit with patients. I had a class in Canberra, Australia one time with like 55 people in it. And back in those days, me and Dr. Oliver, who taught my courses with me, was a very skilled doctor and musician and sound healer. Him and I used to demonstrate sound healing and doing healing ceremonies to teach people how to go beyond just your evaluation and how to use these principles of healing and working with spiritual forces. So I would call in spirit guides and angels to come help people, and then I would also have my soul connect me to their soul, and I would basically write down what my soul, through connection to their soul, would say we needed to use for which musical instruments, which frequencies, etc. But what would happen is, because once I opened the ceremony, a lot of things like angels and higher spiritual beings would come into the room. People with entity possessions would go off because the entities don't like that energy around them. And so one time we had 3 very badly possessed people in the room in Canberra, Australia. And we had one big rugby player, probably 220-pound muscular dude, thought he was a wolf, and he was on his hands and knees running around the room trying to bite people and attack people. And at the same time, 2 others went off, all strong males, acting very, like you're talking some scared the shit out of people. I mean, people were crying their eyes out, even men were crying their eyes out, calling the cops, running out the door. I mean, this was, like exorcist type stuff. And even my assistant instructors were scared to death. So I was having to calm and center and work with these people and ground them. And then...
How'd you deal with that?
Well, I was able to stabilize them. I just work with the entities. I've run into these things many times. So I just talk to them and, ask them, why are you here? Why have you possessed this person? And so I ultimately connected each of them with healers in Australia that I had to do research to find, or that I connected to people and found, and to help stabilize them. And I was able to get the room stable, but that's one example of an experience that scared the shit out of a lot of people. But because I had seen this, I've been conducting healing ceremony with plant medicines for a long time, so I've seen everything you can think of come out of people. And I also know how to do entity work. So does Angie as a shaman. She does it all the time. But the most scary experiences I've ever had is, I've done a lot of research on myself. And because I've had so many people come to me from all over the world that have been injured quite badly by doing too much plant medicines, or too frequently, or too deep a doses. A lot of people became schizophrenic. A lot of people got entity possessions. Really just a lot of psychological trauma, because if you open up the ego to the point where it can no longer control the unconscious, then you can't limit what comes into your conscious perception. So you can end up being in multiple dimensions of reality at one time, and you can't tell which one's more real than the other. And you can also have things like what Jung would call complexes, which are networks of neural associations, for example, from trauma, that have so much psychic energy in them, they develop a personality of their own, and that's the source of multiple personality disorder. So I've seen a lot of these things, and because I had so many of these people coming to me from all these plant medicine ceremonies all over the world, I realized I needed to map out the inner dimensions. So, and because I did a year of training with a doctor that uses plant medicines, and I became a member of the Native American Council so I could use them legally through the Native American Indian rights, I started researching in 2006 on myself, and I would take a particular medicine, be it mushrooms, LSD, DMT. I used San Pedro. I used many different medicines, and I would progressively up the dose ceremony after ceremony until I hit psychosis, and I would map out what was the inner terrain like, what were the kind of entities that showed up. Like, I've run into extraterrestrial beings many times and had lots of conversations. I've met many dark entities as well. Well, so the point I'm driving at is I've been through some really scary shit. I've been broke. I've went bankrupt. I've had death in the family. I've had traumas that I didn't know I'd ever recover from. Like I told you, I was completely unconscious for 2 days in a coma from a head injury. I've had 6 major concussions racing motocross. But the experiences that really were intense is when I got into real deep plant medicine ceremonies with DMT and DMT and mixed with in combination with ayahuasca, and I have gone so deep into God, I didn't know if I was alive anymore or how to get back, and I've completely dissolved into beyond the universe. I've had many samadhi experiences. I worked with a Tai Chi master for a long time. I did daily Tai Chi for 18 years, sometimes twice a day. I've trained in medical Qigong. I did lots of that. I meditated for years and years and still do. I've gone to non-dual states with no medicines whatsoever many times, but I went so deep in many of these plant medicine ceremonies that I literally, I didn't even know if I was alive. I was so merged with the emptiness and there's nothing you can say to describe it, but I have been so deep. I woke up, came into consciousness, found myself curled into the fetal position, crying for my mother. And I'm an ex-fighting paratrooper. And the intensity of the vastness and the emptiness of God is so utterly shocking to the psyche that there is nothing that can prepare you for it. Nothing. And those experiences, whenever they've happened, have been something that some of them took me months and months to reintegrate from. And one time I had a very deep DMT journey. And interestingly, DMT doesn't last long in the body because the body loves it. It eats it up instantly. So a DMT journey only lasts about 12 minutes. But I had a complete union with God. And every single day for, I think, 14 days at exactly 2:38 a.m., strangely enough, I went into a complete reliving of it. And it was profound. And I was like alive in multiple dimensions. I've had experiences that were so absolutely contrary to everything we're taught about reality. And being a remote viewer, it was easier for me to reconcile some of these things. But I've actually found that my soul is living in multiple bodies in different dimensions. And even in one dimension, I'm on a different planet altogether, but it's similar to Earth. But I'm with a wife and I've got 3 kids and I'm living more of a hunter-gatherer type, but it was in a place that really felt like Hawaii. It was very warm. And there was these beautiful wading pools, natural wading pools, many of them almost like craters that the natives would swim in and fish in. And I would be out with my wife and kids. And I mean, these are just the kinds of experiences I've come back from and went, how in the fucking world is this possible? And so I'd have to go into meditation and ask my soul to take me back to these dimensions when I was not on the medicine, so I could actually consciously and take notes and really like comprehend it. And I've come to the conclusion that God is infinite intelligence, infinite power, infinite creativity, infinite information, and infinite processing speed, and that God is actually testing every single possibility that exists at the same time, everywhere, simultaneously, and that time is an illusion that is created, and each of us is what I call Ram Das, Ram God, Das worker. We are each expressing one potential of God, living it out, and that there is no judgment from being a Hitler or a mass murderer to a saint. It's all God testing all of its possibilities for its own self-realization. And paradoxically, God itself is growing in its own evolution, and what we call the universe is actually one of an infinite number of universes, but that in every one of them, if you think of the universe as a living being, it's going through the same stages of growth and development that we go through from birth to the successive stages of life to old age and maturity. And that's what the Om of Hinduism really means. Ah, I awaken. Ooh, I'm dreaming. I'm falling asleep. Underscore, end of cycle.
Life.
End of that cycle. Yeah. And so this is, Om is scale invariant. It's active from a subatomic particle all the way to a universe. It's in every, I talk all about this in my Spirit Gym series. I show how Om is the master cycle that's nested in everything. And so I also have met extraterrestrial civilizations in my astral travels and my remote viewing and astral travels that are so far advanced beyond us. And I've even met extraterrestrial beings that say they've re-engineered us and that they have changed our DNA so that we have more abilities, and they're the ones that took us from being primates and turned us into humans. And I've had wild conversations with these beings, and they've taught me things that I know that I'm not imagining things, because I can go research things and find them. And so I've come to the realization that God is everything and everyone, and that God itself is in its own process of evolution, and that what we call the universe is ultimately God's body, and that we are each like cells. Just like your body's made of approximately 100 trillion cells, every living organism is a source of experience and information within the body of God. So just like we have a heart and a liver and kidneys, you could say the Earth is like an organ in the solar system, which is an organ in the galaxy, which is an organ in the universe. And that every one of them is serving some kind of a very profound and unique function of experiencing and gathering information so that God wakes up to what it is. And I found exactly what the Hindu sages said about the cycles of how the cycle of Brahma coming into being, sometimes referred to as Vishnu, and then a universe comes into being and it grows and matures and then it terminates. But I found that it's not that the universe is doing that as a whole, because there's star systems in the universe that are being born all the time, and there's others that are aging. So our solar system will go through its own evolutionary process, and Steiner describes that process very beautifully. And that the consciousness that's now on Earth will then move to another planet as it evolves, and ultimately what we call human beings will become what Steiner refers to as the lowest ranking angels, and then there's 10 that we're on the 10th, will become the 10th hierarchy, and that this is exactly what's going on everywhere, and that ultimately the entire creation is what we could call a nursery for consciousness. It is God growing its own self-realization. And this is why I love the first principle of Sufism. It's like, the Sufis figured it out, because their first principle is, there is no God but God. I worship everything and everyone. And when you have the kind of realizations I have, one of the funniest jokes God plays is people looking for God. I've got news for you. You're wearing it.
Yeah,
You're
you
eating it. You're breathing it.
Yep.
You're looking at it. You're walking on it. You're shitting it. You're putting it in your garden. You're growing it. There's nothing here.
You're smoking it.
You're smoking it. Cheers. Thanks for the reminder. There's nothing here but God, right? Yeah. And the function of evil is to uphold the good. Because
the contrast, yeah?
Well, you see, you can't have consciousness unless you have a relative opposite. You can't know good without bad, north without south, in without out, good without evil. So God is so brave, God will explore its own negative potentials with just as much commitment as its positive potentials. And within any group of souls, there's always the negative polarity holders, and their job is to create the stress to make sure that we don't get too happy and too calm to stop growing.
Well, that's the challenge.
And that's it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's no growth substitute. There's no growth stimulant like pain, and God knows that too, yeah?
Yeah, that's why I call the pain teacher. When you're not paying attention, the pain teacher comes to inspire you to wake up.
And it'll tap you on the shoulder, and if you don't listen, it'll knock you on the head, and then it'll push you off the cliff.
And then it'll remove your head.
It'll take it off.
And then you figure it out, and you go, oh my God, I missed the boat. I got to go try it again. And that's what's really going on. And, God's got the wickedest sense of humor. The things I've seen just are unbelievable. I mean, I've laughed and cried so hard, it took me days to get over the muscle pain from hours of just crying my eyes out because of all the pain that God's willing to go through as human beings and animals and everything else. But also the humor and the joy behind it. You realize that God is a paradox top to bottom. And if you can't handle a paradox, then you have to fall into a belief system which gives you permission to stop asking questions. And that's the problem with people, is they're inherently lazy. So every ism or cult, which religions are largely cults, is an excuse to just let somebody else tell you what's true so you can stop doing the work of asking, is it really true?
And then, because that's the difference between the belief and the knowing, isn't it?
Well, the knowing comes only from experience, right? And so I don't care if people say that I'm crazy. I don't give a shit. I know what I've experienced. And unlike a lot of people, I've been brave enough to find the edges of myself repeatedly and keep penetrating and really have a visceral inner sense of what is real. And ultimately, there's nothing more real than what you perceive. Perception is reality, right? If you tell me that you're hot in this room and I say, quit bullshitting, you can't be hot, it's not that hot in here, then I'm an idiot because I'm denying your experience.
Yeah.
So if you, whatever you tell me as my patient, I know is real for you, but if it doesn't interface with the reality you're in, it's going to cause pain. And so my job as a therapist is to help you see where your own projected limitations are, where your traumas are, where your perception is distorted. And my definition of reality is what supports you from moment to moment. You can't get by without food. You can't get by without water. You can't get by without air. You can't get by without love and relationships. And reality is also what's happening right now. So most of my patients are suffering from belief systems that are contradictory to reality. And if you look at what's going on in the world right now, we're destroying nature. We're destroying the very reality that we depend upon. So we have a patient that's traumatized very badly and has to wake up to the fact that it's committing suicide. And so if the people of the world were considered to be cells in a body, then the patient needs help. And I started Spirit Gym to guide people through the healing work that I've studied, practiced, and learned and used to help thousands of people heal and be reconnected to reality so that they can focus on creating more love and freedom in their life, regardless of what everybody else is doing. Because if you don't have the bravery to be free, then you will never be free.
I'm conscious of time. I want to hear about Spirit Gym. You've got to go, but I want you to give it a good rap because it's an exciting.
Yeah, Spirit Gym's really the magnum opus of my work. It's a membership-based program. It's based on the 15 volumes of the Spirit Gym book series. It's based on 10 key principles. 1, being the principle of being. 2, the principle of duality, which is the basis of mind. 3, the principle of the Holy Trinity and how Source as pure potential manifests itself through spirit and matter. So we all have that built into us. The 4 is the principle of embodiment and the 4 elements and the system of alchemy that I developed for healing yourself and understanding reality. The principle of the 4 doctors, which I teach: Dr. Happiness, Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Movement. The 4 phases of love. Unconditional love becomes embodied as sex and violence love, which becomes conditional love, which becomes empathetic and compassionate love, and then you can choose nirvana if you get evolved enough, and then you're back to source again. The principle of the 5, which is dealing with the challenge of any process on the hero's journey. So how do you make it through the challenge phase, which is usually when you need a mentor or a guide to teach you how to learn what you need to learn to finish your hero's journey and really become who you are. And I teach the 5 most important things you have to know about how to design a healing program or an exercise program so that it actually works. So there's 5 key principles. The 6th principle of the 6 is the 6 foundation principles I teach: nutrition, hydration, sleep. Those are the feminine. Breathing, thinking, and movement are the masculine. If you don't understand those, you'll never be healthy. The principle of the 7 is the 7 chakras, the soul and the spirit. And what is spirit? What is soul? How do these chakras work? And how is it that we have a spirit and a soul that manifests in a physical body? And how do you work with your soul to get guidance and have your own personal relationship with God? The principle of the 8 is self-reflection. How do you use your capacity to self-reflect, to look at the choices you're making, the beliefs you've had, the challenges in relationships, and identify where you can do better and choose to do it to create freedom for yourself and everybody you share relationships with. The principle of the 9 is a new state of being. Now that you've achieved this new level of consciousness, how do you keep from falling off the wagon? The principle of the 10 is a new level of being. So now that you've completed one cycle of the hero's journey, how do you rest, introspect, dream, and intuit to call forth your next hero's journey for the next stage of your evolution? So it's a system of education that takes you through a healing process and an understanding of these 10 principles, and me giving you a lesson each week and then answering questions and helping people in the audience use the benefits of my life experience as a therapist and a life coach. And I have several mentors that will also be helping, and I will have guest mentors that are experts in key areas that come give lectures on some sort of a regular basis. And the goal is that we all take responsibility for healing and creating freedom within ourselves and going out into the world and exemplifying to people that we can live in harmony with each other, that we can live in harmony with nature, that we can use natural principles, and you can use the best of ancient wisdom and modern science to produce a viable outcome that gives our children a chance for a future.
And what forum is that in? It's online.
It's online, yeah.
Is it live? It's all live?
It's live online, but all the lessons are recorded. Yeah. So there's about 60 hours, and I'll keep adding them. There's about 60 hours of recorded lessons that you get with your membership that take you through all the healing exercises and give you all the knowledge and explorations that correlate to the chapters of the 15-volume book set. And then you can use the books to go deeper than I can take people through, because the books are quite deep and well referenced. So the books are for the people that want a deep dive, but the lessons are for anybody that wants to heal and learn these key principles and how to apply them in their life so they can develop their own relationship with God and their own spirituality, and also have a tribe of people that share similar values and who are ready to really take responsibility for their own growing up waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up, really.
It's one of my favourite words, tribe.
Yeah.
Because COVID certainly helped people find their tribe,
Yeah,
didn't it?
yeah.
That's a whole other conversation. And tell me one last question, Paul. How in terms of the investment people make in that? How does that work? Is it sort of
It's $2,400 for the year, which includes access to all the lessons, and you get the weekly lessons from me live, and then you get to spend 60 to 90 minutes with me each week to ask any question in the audience, and then I give you guidance or tell you which lessons will address that challenge. So you get 4 meetings a week that are ultimately about 2 to 2.5 hours long, and you get over 60 hours of training, and you get the guest mentors. You get a PDF copy of How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. If you're a member, you get each edition of Spirit Gym on Kindle as part of your membership when it comes out, so you have the deeper stuff. And so really what I did is I put everything that I do with my private clients that pay me, I'm an expensive guy to see. It's $750 an hour for my consulting. And if you watch the testimonials, there's a lot of people that have worked with me on the testimonials, so you can get a sense of what happens. And so really for like peanuts on the dollar compared to working with me privately, you can take advantage of everything that people have paid me a lot of money to learn and go through to heal.
And you've got your first session this afternoon.
It's today.
You got to get organised for that. Paul, so many more questions, a whole list I didn't really even get to, but that's fine.
Come back.
Well, I am going to come back, and I want to do a little Q&A, and some things you might, if you're okay with it, might have to do a little quick one on a Zoom or a whatever.
Yeah, we can do it. I have to go.
At some point, you have to go. No, not now, but in the future, we might try and line up.
No problem.
I'm just oozing with more questions.
Yeah.
Paul, that's been fascinating. You've blown my head off and got me thinking so much about it. I love the whole idea of Spirit Gym, and it's a culmination of 40 years of your work.
Yeah, and you got an overview of it right there.
Right here. That's it. So people go to website?
myspiritgym.com.
Awesome. We'll put all the details in the show notes.
And then you got my podcast too. So that's Spirit Gym with Paul Chek. Yep. Used to be Living 4D, but Spirit Gym with Paul Chek. And the lowest level of Spirit Gym is the podcast membership, where you get the extended play on my podcast, which I'll start putting in Spirit Gym concepts more consistently now. So for anybody that wants a sample that can't afford what is a mentorship, they can start with the Spirit Gym podcast, which is only $7.99 a month.
Awesome. So I'm going to do a subscription as well. We are doing one, but a new one. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to try and track you down and do a little 20-minute session on a topic of your choice.
Okay.
And we'll just do a bit of a deep dive for our subscribers.
Okay.
Paul, that was fascinating. And so appreciate and grateful for your time and your conversation.
Thank
and
you.
your patience as well. And we'll catch up again very soon.
Thanks, buddy.
That was so good.
Thank you.
Don't stop doing what you're doing, okay?
I don't have any desire to do anything else.
You got another 41 years in you?
I'll just go till my soul says it's time to leave. Your work's done.
Is that a question you probably don't want to ask your soul?
I do, and my soul has told me that I will probably be here till I'm 78 to give my kids the knowledge. They both came here to do world work, so my soul says
at least till then.
About 78, and then it'll be time for me to leave. But my soul said that my work will be used by many generations after me.
You'll live on. We didn't even get to reincarnation. That's next time.
Yeah, no, lots of stuff. And you can also mention the Chek Institute, because there's loads of stuff there.
That'll be in the show notes as well.
This episode of the Regenerative Journey is brought to you by Farmers Footprint Australia. They believe farming is more than growing food. It's about healing land, nourishing people, and reconnecting to nature. Through farmer wellbeing retreats, visual and experiential storytelling, and programs like their KnowGlyphosate Campaign, that's KNOW Glyphosate Campaign, and their new podcast, The Invisible Ingredient, they're building a movement for a regenerative future. Join them in reimagining our food system, where farmers thrive, communities flourish, and the earth is restored. Learn more at farmersfootprint.org.au or jump onto their Instagram page to keep across their campaigns and activities at Farmers Footprint Australia.
So thank you for your time today. We're set up here again. Penny's been amazing just getting everything set up because I'm not a tech head.
Tech wizard.
She's done well. And this session, if you're listening to this, it's because you are a very supportive subscriber to the Regenerative Journey Plus thing. I'm always out of focus, which is probably a good thing. My guests tend to be the ones that people want to make sure is in. You in focus there. Is that as good as image of Paul Chek as we will ever get?
That's probably about as good as it gets.
Okay, I'm a little bit blurred. That's probably a good thing. So this is just a bit of because the interview we did that goes to everyone was fantastic, and I didn't want to chop into it because there was so much to it.
Thank you.
So this session is really about whatever you want to talk about. I'm on my drive down here through that phenomenal LA traffic. I battled. I was thinking, what would be great value for me and our listeners and watchers is if you were to, and this could go anywhere, of course, let us know kind of what are some of the tips and tricks, if I can use that expression, for
Have good smoke.
have a good smoke. But that's not any old smoke.
No,
That's special.
It's not even smoke. It's water vapor, but it's a hopped up dehydrator that pushes hot air through herbs, and I put flower essences and essential oils and organic herbs and clean tobacco. So it's really just water vapor.
Yeah.
It looks like smoke, but there's really no smoke in there at all.
Yep.
I'm not one who's big on torturing his body.
No. And when you say clean tobacco, that's
No chemicals.
no chemicals, so organically grown.
I don't know for sure it's organically grown, but I did a lot of research to find a company that grows tobacco without chemicals. And I found the Stockabee Corporation was the place to go. There are organic tobacco suppliers, but they don't make nearly as nice a tasting tobacco as that. I did a lot of research and found that this particular one, which is called Northern Shag, has the lowest. Yeah, it comes from Denmark, and it has the least amount of nicotine in it.
Yeah, right.
Because I get very easily addicted to nicotine, and even though you're vaporizing, it still pulls nicotine out of it. The vaporizer only goes to 450 degrees. A cigarette burns, different articles say, between 800 and 1200 degrees. So you'll get a full liberation of nicotine if you light tobacco on fire. But because this thing doesn't get that hot, and I don't run it at full heat, I run it at probably around 400 degrees. And with this low nicotine tobacco, I can vaporize it as much as I want. And if I stop doing it, because I have to travel or something, I don't have any withdrawal. But if I do any, like a lot of my friends like the snuffs that you snort, tobacco powders, and they're super strong. And within 15 minutes, I feel like I'm crashing.
Yeah.
And the same thing if I smoke any tobacco at all, I go up
Straight.
and I feel a really nice clear-headed buzz. But then 15 minutes or so later, I feel like I'm going into a withdrawal, and I just do not want to get addicted to anything.
Did you smoke when you were a young man?
There was a period when I was working in the logging industry that I smoked for about maybe 6 months, but I was very competitive with all my buddies. And when I found out that all of a sudden they were able to get more, at that point we were doing logging for shakes, which is cedar shakes, for roofing. So we were going in and we had, I was with a friend of mine who had the rights to a certain chunk of land that he'd got government rights to in the mountains, and we would go fall the trees and then cut them into about 16-inch blocks. And, then we'd have to split them because some of these trees are like 8 feet across at the butt and, 160 feet tall. And then we'd use wedges to split them, and we would be carrying chunks of wood out that were probably, as big as you could carry. They'd probably weigh about 90 to 130 pounds each. So we used to compete to see who could carry the most, and we'd have to stack them in a big truck to deliver them to the mill. And after smoking for a while, I couldn't keep up with these guys, and it pissed me off so bad I just dropped it, and I never went back.
That's funny. Let me think. I saw on a video online the other day of a machine that was probably doing that very thing. They were putting in a block, and it was a guilotine. It was going.
Yeah.
It was automated.
Yeah.
And it were these perfect. I guess we might call them shingles.
Shingles are thinner and smaller. Shakes are about a centimeter or so thick, and they're probably about double the size and length of a shingle.
So where do they go in a house?
They're the same. They're just it's different style. It looks a little bit more old fashioned, a little more rustic, and they probably last longer because there's more wood to them.
Yeah, right.
So you have companies that make shakes and make shingles. Oh, this is on Vancouver Island when I was 17 years old, maybe. So
that wasn't that long ago.
That was quite a while ago.
How old would those trees have been? The 8-foot diameter. That's a pretty.
They would have been 500 plus years old. I wish I would have known at the time. If I would have had the consciousness to realize what I was doing, I wouldn't have been cutting trees down like that. But
it's a job.
I didn't know any better, and it was just working to make a living and feed my family. And looking back on it, it makes me cringe of all the beautiful trees I cut down. But you grow up and you learn.
Hemp's quite a. I did some research recently on hemp in Australia. It's not taking off, but there's certainly a lot of research in terms of an alternative to timber for construction and even the moulding they can do and it's really incredible.
Well, there was a huge hemp industry in the United States, but Rockefeller shut it down because he didn't want anything to compete with his oil-based products. So the reality of it is, growing hemp, we could leave the forests untouched, and hemp, as you're probably aware, not only makes a wide variety of medicinal molecules, but can be used for textile. I got these shoes I'm wearing are made of hemp.
And that, I believe, is the
stalk.
Bark?
It's the stalk.
The stalk. Okay.
Yeah.
There's other stuff you can make with the outside of the bark, I guess it is. Is that right?
I'm not sure all the thing. Hemp is so versatile, it's mind-blowing. And you literally could completely eliminate the lumber industry because they can actually compress it and make the equivalent of 2x4s and all the things we use to build houses. I mean, it would literally take, you can make everything you do out of lumber with it, and you can make probably multiple hundreds of different molecules that come out of the hemp plant of medicinal types. And you've also got the oil, which has got a lot of therapeutic and nutritional benefits. So it's one of these miraculous products, but due to the nefarious forces that got a hold of all of us and still do have us by the throat, hemp farming kind of was forced into disappearance. And I would love to see it make a comeback for things other than just marijuana, because it's so versatile. It would really change our relationship with the environment, because I'm sure that the logging industry is just totally destructive to the environment.
Well, in Victoria, in Australia, I know I was talking to a fellow the other day about it. He's trying to convince, and he probably never will be able to, the Victorian government, who are big supporters of the logging industry in Victoria, which was, it's a state with a lot of natural resource, you might call it that.
Yeah.
And he was wanting them to redeploy the idle logging equipment. Basically, it wouldn't be a one-for-one type of thing, but say, which is sitting idle in a lot of cases, to then be utilised in the hemp industry, different product and different similar machinery, but it could be redeployed in some way, and they're just going no, because they're somewhat beholden to the forestry industry. So they wouldn't want to encourage the
lumber industry is a big industry, and it's like, it's its own mafia, so that's why they're not going to let hemp be grown, because unless they become the hemp growers, they're going to lose billions and billions of dollars. But isn't that just the disease that has the world, right?
It's one of many examples, isn't
It's
it?
money instead of sustainability. And
Henry Ford built a whole car out of it, didn't he?
I don't know about that, but I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, you like I said, I've looked into it. You can make so many things out of hemp. It's crazy. It's really versatile.
Let's bring it back to you. So tips and like things that you might recommend people do. And I'm thinking almost chronologically through a day. Because there are one thing that's obvious, and not just because I've been in the States for the last month, but my curiosity with, and I follow a lot of different people, whether it's about diet, nutrition, or whether it's lifestyle, whether it's call it self-development, call it spiritual sort of transformation. There are so many. It's confusing and overwhelming for people to sort of go, okay, well, I don't know what's best for me. And obviously, I listened to one of your podcasts on the way up here with that lady whose name escapes you, who wrote the book about vegan, vegetarian.
Oh, Jane Buxton?
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
It's great, so good. And
she's an amazing woman.
Yeah, well, she's done the research, and it's sort of endless amount. But that's my point, is that for someone to go to kind of make some decisions, and they may have at least got to the point of acknowledging that that it would be in their interest to change lifestyle things, habits.
Yeah. Which is most everybody.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone you'd like to think would at some point.
Yeah.
What is the next step? Like how do they assess what they need and then action or execute on their sleep, their nutrition requirements, the direction they want to take their life, how to develop a relationship with their soul. I mean,
yeah,
this is a whole podcast series in itself. But what are some of the things that you would say, look, here's the top, pick a number, 5 things or 10 things.
I don't remember if we talked about this in our podcast together when you were last here, but because here's how this came about. By the time Chek professionals are in their 4th year of training, the academy's 5 years, but it used to be a 4-year program. We had to stretch it out just because it was overwhelming students. But by the time they're at the 4th year, they can do assessments on somebody 8 hours straight because they have learned so much. We assess the entire structure, we assess the glands and the organs, we assess their developmental history from in utero and the environment that the parents were in, to traumas throughout life, to challenges through transitions such as deaths in the family, divorces, loss of businesses, anything that has a significant impact on the development of the individual. And so it's a very, very comprehensive evaluation. It's probably more comprehensive than anywhere in the world. And the problem that occurred around in the early 2000s is some of my top instructors and students that were very, skilled people. One of them, Matthew Walden's a naturopathic and osteopathic physician, and he was, when he started training with me 27 years ago, he's my director of education now. But they came to me and said, Paul, we're a bit overwhelmed because we find so much stuff wrong with people. And oftentimes there's like 10 or 15 or more, 20 things all that could be considered to be serious, because people are in bad shape out there. And so they said, what we don't understand is, how do you take all this information and synthesize it down into a program, knowing that you're doing what's the most important thing to do for our client first? Because how do you deal with someone who's hurt, tired, struggling, yet you've got enough information to write a very, very comprehensive program? You can have these people doing stretches, exercise, diet, and lifestyle changes all day long for months, And so I took what was an internal process for me, which I kind of felt embarrassed because these guys had been training with me all these years, and I assumed it was fairly obvious. And by this time, they had, so it must have been around 2004 because my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, was out. But in a long story made short, what I did is I sat down and I wrote down my own inner process, and that became the 4-doctor model. So what I did is I developed a 4-step process that can be used by a layperson, or it can be used by the most advanced medical professionals there is, and it still works the same. It's just the depth that you go into it changes depending on the skill level and the amount of data you gather. And this will answer your question. So the first thing that I have to do whenever I'm working with a patient or a client that needs help, and this is the first thing everybody needs to do, we start with number 1 in my system. That's one love. What do you love enough to change for, to grow for, and to get your heart in? Get your heart involved in it. So in a general theme, we call that, what is your dream? So if you came to me, say, with chronic back pain, I'd say, Charles, well, what is your dream for coming to see me? And if that's not clear, what would be your specific goal or objective? And then I would qualify that. I say that if it's not at least a 7 out of 10 for I'm inspired and motivated to do this, it means we don't have a good enough dream, goal, or objective. Because without a clearly defined dream, goal, or objective, there's nothing to create a sense of levity that overcomes the inertia of the habits and the behaviors that led to the issues that people get stuck with. Remember, 85% of all orthopedic injuries are idiopathic, which means when the patient goes to the doctor and says, how did you hurt yourself? They don't know. They didn't fall off a ladder. They didn't lift up a suitcase in the airport. They just don't know. So what that tells you is that these things are progressively coming on, and they're chronic things that are, it's just like, a mosquito sucking your blood. 1 or 2 won't get you, but 500 will. So if you say, what are all the mistakes people are making on a daily basis, and you add them all up, well, it's enough to cause so much stress that the body cannot effectively respond to it. So no matter who it is, there's always lots of these things going on. So I have to say, what is it that you love enough to change for, to manage yourself well for, to make the diet and the lifestyle changes that will bring you into a state where you have enough healing energy, anabolic energy, to recover, and to grow into what it is that you choose to be or do with yourself. Like if you said to me, I've got to run my farm, and that's very important to me, and yes, my heart is into it, I would say, well, that's a really good dream, goal, or objective. So if we don't establish that, then what I found out is that no matter how good the program is, no matter how good the supplements you give them are, it never works, because people have got so many unconscious habit patterns, and a lot of them are reactions to stress. So you get things like a lot of coffee drinking, you get drinking alcohol, you get recreational drugs, you get distractions with video games, with television, social media. And that's because if a person consciously or unconsciously creates a life that's not fulfilling, they actually get caught in a flatland experience where, like, it's all they're doing is just working to pay bills all the time, or trying to survive instead of thrive. So if a person is in that existence, then they have to create a second reality. They have to way to get out of this reality. So you see that, we've got this massive wave now of psychedelic use. We've got huge addiction problems to video games and social media. We have had for a long time tremendous problems with alcohol addiction. And then now we have, almost, I would say, excessive use of marijuana. And now they're legalizing mushrooms in lots of places. So what I've seen is that as more and more of these, shall we say, state-shifting molecules become available, people go deeper and deeper into them because they don't have a sense of direction in their life. They don't have something that inspires them to take care of themselves. For example, if I say, hey, here's a pill that'll get you really high, but it'll cause a lot of back pain. Well, you as a farmer might think, well, if it gets me high for a few hours, but then I got back pain and I can't go take care of my farm, I'm screwing myself. So right away, you're saying, what is important enough for me to make decisions with, right? Without that sense of clear sense of direction or dream or goal or objective, you don't have any way to establish values for making effective decisions. So step one in my program is, what do you love enough to grow for, to change for, or to become? Step two is based on the fact that there's only two forces that create everything in the universe. The feminine, which in Taoism or Chinese medicine is called yin, and that relates to the parasympathetic nervous system, growth, accumulation, regeneration, restoration, and also links to the right brain and to learning. So that relates to hydration, it relates to sleep, and it relates to nutrition. So we have the complementary opposite force, yang. So yin multiplies power and accumulates resources. Yang, the masculine, divides power and utilizes energy and resources. So the more things a person's doing that are what's classically called catabolic, which means tissue destructive, such as work, physical labor, going to the gym, drinking coffee, drinking alcohol, anything that speeds the system up or activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-flight nervous system, which is what shifts the blood flow out of the organs and glands into the musculoskeletal system to ready you for action. Like if you're nervous or you're anxious or you're scared, that'll trigger a sympathetic reaction, and your muscles will get tighter, you'll get adrenaline flow, you'll have a higher level of cortisol, your sense of alertness will go up. And that's really, for example, why people drink so much coffee, because if they're not getting enough sleep, they feel tired all the time, so they need something to activate them and pick them up. But eventually that'll burn the adrenal glands out, because cortisol is made by the adrenal glands. And so you basically have to look at your life in general and say, okay, what am I doing to restore myself? So how do we restore ourselves? We drink quality water. We eat clean, organically grown or biodynamically grown food, or regeneratively farmed food, or animal caught fish, because farm fish is very, very toxic. Okay. We have to have adequate amounts of sleep. And as I show in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, you need to sleep in cycle with the natural rhythms, because the light is what regulates your hormonal system. And as the sun's coming up, you get a progressive increase in cortisol. And as it goes down and cortisol drops down, melatonin goes up. And melatonin is the trigger that releases your anabolic hormones, which are your growth and repair hormones. So when people keep staying up late at night and being stimulated by lights and screens, they keep their cortisol levels up. And so they don't get to have a progressive release of melatonin, so they're staying in a sympathetic, hyperactivated, awake state. And so the longer that goes on, the more it fatigues the adrenal glands, but the harder it is for their body to digest, metabolize, assimilate, repair, and regenerate. So you see that there's this very, very chronic imbalance between incoming nutrition and resources and rest, and outgoing resources and energy, and expressing oneself in a variety of ways, but keeping the system turned on. And so it's kind of like people that run out of money and try to live off of credit cards. If you don't balance the autonomic nervous system, and you don't have enough incoming yin, feminine resources and energy relative to what you're utilizing from nutritional resources, your body's internal reserves. A good example of that is Aaron Fried Pfeiffer, who you may be familiar from Steiner's work, showed all the way back in about 1955, based on his analysis, that by the time people were about 32 years of age, they were enzyme depleted. And so he tracked that right back to processed foods. And this is, in the 50s. And so because people aren't eating enough raw food and enough living foods, they become enzyme depleted. So when they're eating all this food that has no enzymes in it because it's cooked or it's processed, they deplete the enzyme stores of their bodies. And so their biochemical capacity breaks down because enzymes are involved in pretty much every biochemical reaction in your body. So what you see is people can burn their bodies out, and then when they don't have enough enzymes to break their food down, they start having digestive trouble. And if you are hydrochloric acid deficient, which the same people that are enzyme deficient become hydrochloric acid deficient, then you don't have the chief means for killing parasites, bacteria, fungal spores. And so what you see is a very high incidence of fungal infection, bacterial dysbiosis, parasite infection, and all of those poison the body, and all of those organisms release chemicals, they're waste into your body. Many of the parasites, for example, the Ascaris worm, can manipulate the cytokines and immune regulating chemicals and actually disguise themselves. So the immune system gets shut down by mycotoxins, it gets shut down by parasites, it gets confused, and then they're eating the nutrition that's in the gut. And so what you get is people that get further nutritionally deficient, further, because that causes inflammation because these organisms are eating into your tissues all the time, and that's how they lay their eggs in you. So you get global inflammation, and you get a lot of toxicity, and people get tired, so they drink more and more coffee, eat more and more sugar. They do all the things that take them further and further into this yang excess of spending. And the more inflammation you have in the body, the more your body tries to release more and more cortisol, because that's the chief anti-inflammatory hormone. The hotter you get, and the hotter you get, the more your thermoregulatory system gets stressed because it has to cool you down to keep you alive. And the body's very temperature sensitive. And so the thermoregulatory system is probably, if not one of the most energy consumptive systems in the body. It requires contributions from every part of your body. So step 2 then is looking at the general balance of how am I doing with hydrating, nourishing, and resting, and relaxing my mind. Because most people today are so outcome oriented. We've been programmed to be outcome oriented. Everything's always about an outcome. So for example, I stack rocks to create an environment of what I call unbound play. That way it doesn't matter if the rocks fall over, it's just a pile of rocks. And so I can go out there and I can get some exercise and I can be creative, but I can relax my mind and not have to think, am I performing good enough? Is, like a student, am I going to get a good grade? Is my boss going to complain about this? You can just completely let go of all that. So, part of what I'll share in a minute relates to, we have to really be conscious that if we're constantly pursuing outcomes and we have so many internal systems of measuring ourselves all the time, then what I've found with working with thousands of patients in over 40 years is we get what is classically now referred to as control fatigue. We're trying to juggle so much and trying to always achieve these outcomes all the time that we get to the point where we're so tired that we start giving up on the management of things, and there's things that are hard to give up. Like if you've got a job and you have to perform at work to get paid, you're a lawyer or you're a construction worker or anybody, you got to do your job well. So you can't just let that go or you'll lose your job. Although the quality of that work's going down rapidly, as most people know. So what we start giving up on is we start giving up on the things that we're most ignorant about as a race, as humans. So we're pretty ignorant about food. We're pretty ignorant about water. We're pretty ignorant about exercise. We're pretty ignorant about the importance of sleep and sleep cycles. We're pretty ignorant about the importance of rest and valuing rest versus always having to do something all the time. We're very ignorant about doing things that are happy making versus seeking happiness vicariously by watching television. You know, I say life is not a spectator sport, it's a participation sport. So the more tired people get, the more they start being spectators. And the more time you spend in front of screens, the more hypnotized you get. Because as soon as you start watching a screen, you go into a state of hypnosis, which is why it's so easy to program people when they're watching screens. And so you start becoming less and less conscious about the choices you're making. Well, after a while, you know, what do you got? You got an inflamed, tired body that is malnourished, that's inflamed, like I said, inflamed, that's not sleeping well, which causes people to have cognitive problems. They can't think well. With all that inflammation in the gut, you get leaky gut syndrome. The next thing you know, you have, you know, I've seen people with as many as 52 food intolerances. So they're having food reactions, immune reactions to everything they're eating. The gut's leaking, which is another big problem. And so their anabolic capacity dwindles dramatically. And so you find a lot of those people will say things, well, I used to exercise, but it made me so sore I couldn't keep doing it, because they don't have any regenerative abilities, right? So what I'm saying in a nutshell is, if a person wakes up in the morning and even after 8 hours of sleep still feels tired, still feels like they need to drink, that's a bad sign. If they need to drink coffee or tea. If they can't get by without processed sugar, that's a very bad sign. If they have a lack of mental clarity, that's an indication that problems are there. If their body is too hot, one of the ways, you know, you can do it without a temperature gauge is, I say, how often do you want to put ice in your drinks? If you look around, even here on a winter day, you can go to any gas station and see people coming in constantly getting huge giant cups of soda pop filled with ice. And I'm like, who would want to drink ice water on a cold day like that unless they were already overheated inside? And you see this going on all over the world. And so if you're overheated, then that's not a good sign. And one of the ways you can tell is when you have these inflammatory syndromes, people have it, and especially as the adrenal glands begin to fatigue, people have a tendency to wake up in the middle of the night, usually between 1 and 3 in the morning, hot and sweaty, and they end up being wide awake, and they have a hard time getting back to sleep, and they usually fall asleep just about the time they're supposed to get up. And so what you're seeing is that there's so much heat in the body, and because there's so much garbage getting into the body because the immune system can't keep up and the gut's leaking, then in the middle of the night, they're getting a very strong cortisol release to try to counterbalance all the inflammation in their body. And parasites have the opposite day-night cycle that most organisms do. So they're active. Full moon for a parasite is like high noon for us. So at night, when we're supposed to be asleep, regenerating ourselves, if you've got a lot of funguses in you and you've got parasites in you, then what happens is they're actually doing their busy work, boring into your body to lay their eggs and eating up your food and making a lot of inflammation when you're supposed to be asleep, and the body picks up that inflammation and triggers a cortisol release, which wakes you up. And this progressively burns the adrenals because the body doesn't get to go into a state of restoration at night. It's constantly working. And another thing that people do that, as a side note, that's a really bad idea is they eat big meals right before bed. And you should not do that because your glands and organs cannot rest all night. And so you wake up feeling very kind of lethargic and tired. But the other thing is that people don't pay attention to the fact that your body's constantly broadcasting to you some things that most people are not aware of, but they should be aware of, is the quality of your hair. You know, now for me, that's not a problem, but grass doesn't grow in a busy street.
What are you saying about me? Just good genes.
That you have such powerful anabolic abilities. So, you know, you see hair getting dry. You see split ends. You see hair that's just not healthy. It's brittle. A lot of people notice their hair starts falling out. You look at fingernails and toenails, and you'll see ridges. You'll see check marks. You'll see little white spots, which is almost always an indication of a zinc deficiency.
Yeah.
You'll see nails that get too weak. You'll see nails that get brittle. So there's a number of things, but that's telling you a lot about your nutritional status and your mineral and your trace mineral status. You look at, if your cortisol levels are too high, the first thing that happens is you start accumulating fluid around the belly button, which looks like fat. And as the cortisol stays high, because when we're under stress, the body perceives we're in a fight or flight situation, it begins to hold on to water because it thinks maybe we're going into a battlefield or a dangerous situation. So people start gaining a lot of weight and they look swollen. And so if you start seeing that your body is swollen, and then the other thing is when your cortisol goes up, it liberates blood sugar to prepare you to fight or flight. But you know, we're not running from a lion. We're running from the fear that we can't pay our bills, or that somebody's not giving us enough likes on Facebook, or so we keep creating all these lions and all these perceived threats, which the body perceives as just as real as a legitimate threat, because to the body, the mind is God. So what you have is you have this repeated elevation of blood sugar, which then is followed by blood sugar crash. And so you have people whose pancreas is being worked to death and their blood sugar is going up and down all the time. Well, that would be like if you had a little monkey under the hood of your car, changing the air-gas ratio in your engine, making it very lean, which can burn a hole right through a piston, and then making it so rich that you're just wasting tons of fuel and your exhaust is dark and stinky, and you can smell gas coming out of the tailpipe. So, or it would be like if someone starts a raging fire in a fireplace, which would be high blood sugar, but then going low blood sugar is like someone's dousing the thing with water and your whole house is full of wet smoke.
Yeah.
So it's very stressful on the body. And this is as common as white bread out there. I mean, I see this all the time. You can look at the quality of your skin. Are you having pimples? Are you having various types of skin reactions? How do your joints feel? If you're athletic or you're doing physical labor, are you recovering? Is your muscles recovering and you're able to actually have good work tolerance each day? You can pay attention to your breath. You can do something very simple. You can stick your finger in your back of your mouth and swipe the root of your tongue and smell it. And if it smells bad, it usually means you have bacterial imbalance in your body or that your body's out of balance. You can look at the whites of the eyes and see if the eyes are clear, and the more tired people get and the more toxic they get, the more cloudy their eyes get. Like these are just some of the things that should be taught to people, but they end up feeling really lousy, and the first thing they do is they go to a doctor who gives them a drug who increases the toxicity in their body that covers up the symptoms that are there to tell you, hey, you need to make changes. What you're doing is not working. So, you know, if you take what I've just said, the body's constantly telling you what the report card is on your diet and your lifestyle, but people keep drugging it instead of working with it, right? So we have 1, love. What do you love enough to change for, to grow for, and become? 2, where are you out of balance with regard to the feminine, nutrition, hydration, and the masculine, which is Dr. Movement and Dr. Happiness. So we'll get to the 4, which is the 4 doctors. The 3 is there's only 3 choices you can make in relationship to any person, place, or thing. The optimal, which is the best for you and everybody involved in what I call your dream team, which is the people that are helping you. For example, if your dream is to run a farm successfully, then I would say, well, everybody that works for you is on your dream team. So if you make decisions that are disruptive to the dream team, like maybe you start getting, you know, a little carried away with alcohol and start showing up late to work, and all your workers are going, well, I don't know what the hell to do today. Or you forget to, you know, do specific things you got to do to keep animals healthy, or crop work, or whatever, you can destroy your whole dream, right? So the 4 doctors can also be broken down into the 6 foundation principles. Dr. Diet and Dr. Quiet correlate to nutrition, hydration, and sleep. Dr. Happiness and Dr. Movement correlate to breathing, thinking, and movement. Because most of the things that we do for happy making and movement are yang because they're utilizing more energy and resources per unit of time than they're cultivating. A yin activity regenerates more energy and gives you more resources per unit of time. For example, when you sit and have a nice meal and drink good water, you're actually bringing in a lot more energy and resources than it costs for you to sit there and have the meal, right? But if it takes you 30 minutes to eat the meal, and we say the cost of running your body for 30 minutes relative to what the meal gave you leaves you with a surplus, but then if I take you into the gym and work you out for 30 minutes, you will leave with a deficit, which is why it's called working out, okay? Because you're spending, not gaining. And that's another problem, because a lot of people that have all these problems that gain a lot of weight start going to gyms and getting on exercise programs, and they can't figure out why they're not getting lean or getting fit or getting strong, because they don't have enough anabolic reserve to respond to the stress in their body plus the exercise. So you see people that actually go to the gym and get fatter and more tired and start having a lot of injuries because they're pushing themselves so hard now. It's like they're redlining the whole system, but they think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing because we have an uneducated health and exercise system.
And they haven't sat down to good meals where they're actually replenishing and renewing and
They're not getting enough rest.
Nutrition and the rest, yeah.
Yeah. So the optimal choice is the one that's best for you and everybody involved in the dream team. The suboptimal is the one that usually gives instant gratification but causes trouble in the management of your dream and your dream team. Then we have the third option, which is to do nothing. If you've got to make an important decision, like should I get vaccinated, or should I invest in this stock, or should I marry this person, or take on this business partner, or sell my business, if you don't have enough information to make an intelligent decision, then you should do nothing until you've gathered the information and you feel very clear that you're making the best possible decision. So step one for do nothing is don't make a decision until you have enough information to make a well-informed decision. Application two for doing nothing means if you're having an argument or a dispute with somebody that you have a relationship with, and you cannot stay connected at the heart and you're at risk of damaging the relationship, you should call time out and do nothing with regard to continuing this battle, because you could damage the relationship indefinitely, and that can lead to a lot of stress in your life, and it's not healthy, and it's not a great way to live, because you ultimately burn bridges everywhere you go. So in that state, you call a timeout and you say, look, I'm having a hard time staying connected at the heart. I'd really like to come back to this when I can stay connected with you and I don't feel at risk of damaging the relationship, and you just got to walk away. The worst application of the do nothing option is apathy, which by definition means not to care. Once a person gets to the point where they just don't care about important things in their life or about important people in their life, they're usually A, in a state of depression, and B, on the edge of suicide. And you'd be surprised how many people are apathetic. So getting to that point is very, very dangerous. So it's the worst possible choice you can make, because if you don't care, it means you're really not participating in life anymore. You're not participating in relationships. You're not participating in taking care of yourself. You're not interested in growing. You're not interested in learning. You have a closed mindset. And you usually become codependent to others and or the government. And you're not really supporting the world that's carrying the weight of you. So it's it's a dead end road, and it's not a good place to get to. So we have the one love, we have the two forces we have to balance, and we have three choices to make. And those three choices should be made in conscious awareness of the four doctors. So if you take a living philosophy, if you take what your life really consists of, and you say, if I reduce life down to the minimum that I must be conscious of, which I investigated this for years, it turns out you have 4 categories. One, what am I willing to do to create happiness for myself so I'm not codependent on other people or substances or external sources, such as media, to create the sense of happiness so that I'm actually enjoying my life. So Dr. Happiness is the chief physician because Dr. Happiness has to decide what is happy making for you, and Dr. Happiness has to establish core values. And those core values have to be established for Dr. Movement, Dr. Diet, and Dr. Quiet, as well as happiness. So Dr. Happiness is really all about what gives me a sense of connection and fulfillment in my life. What gives me a sense of joy in relationship to myself and others? What are the things that I can do, from making music to art to dancing to singing to playing with children to creative pursuits that don't have an outcome attached to them, that give me a chance just to really enjoy being. You see, we're so caught in doing, we forgot this thing called being. And if we don't have that sense of freedom, then again, we get too overloaded, we suffer control fatigue. So Dr. Happiness must take responsibility for saying, what is happy making for me? And what am I going to do to make that happen in my life? And for me, for example, it's very important for me to have my morning routine from my spiritual practices, my prayers, my inner work, and to have at least an hour a day to study things that feel nourishing to my mind and my soul, or I don't really want to engage the world. I feel like I'm running on empty. I feel like I don't have anything to share because I haven't filled my own cup yet. And so Dr. Happiness turns out at the end of the day to be very important, because if you look at what most people do to medicate the fact that they're not happy in their work and their relationships, well, it turns out to be that not being happy in your relationship with yourself, your relationship with others, and your relationship with life itself is probably the root cause of most drug use, most illnesses, most diseases. So our culture has become so used to buying happiness in pills or, in external forms, it's lost its way with regard to how to create happiness. And I have to work with people to teach them how to do that. Then we have to say, how much movement do I need to meet the requirements for baseline health? Well, most experts say you need at least an hour of exercise a day. I say that depends on the intensity and the type of exercise. So my general guideline is you need 30 to 60 minutes of movement a day, and that movement has to be of the right type and variety to give you the physical and physiological health and stability that it takes just to be a healthy human being living in a field of gravity. Okay. Then with Dr. Movement, we have to say, well, what is your dream? Well, if you come to me and say my dream is to run my farm effectively and really do that without pain getting in the way and problems, then I have to say, well, okay, Charles, we're going to have to get you in better shape than just the average individual, because the average individual is not moving hay bales and managing animals and equipment and tools and things that require some physical strength and some, integrity of the body. So you're going to have an exercise program that builds you up in the right movement patterns and gives you the right amount of strength, power, agility, speed, coordination, balance, endurance to fit that environment. Okay? Or you're going to get injured. It's just a matter of time. If people use their physical labor as their exercise program, then day by day their body deconditions until that's their maximum level. So what happens is you take a guy who's really fit, like I am, put me in a job, say, as a policeman, but then I tell myself I don't have time to exercise. Well, the next thing you know, a couple of months later, I've lost all my strength because I'm not training anymore, and now I'm at the maximum level, and the next thing you know, I'm in an altercation with someone, or I got to chase some guy down, and I tear a hamstring or blow my back out. So if we don't, my estimate is you should have at least 30% higher of a level of conditioning than your work or dream environment demands, or you don't have enough reserves to deal with the challenges that inevitably come when you don't get enough sleep, or when you're traveling, or when you have a crisis in your life or your family. If you have a 30% reserve, then you have enough to make it through these things. And so these are real factors. So in a nutshell, with movement, you got to have enough to keep yourself healthy, to meet the requirements of being a healthy human being in general. And then you got to have enough conditioning to deal with the environment that is conducive to your life, your dream, your work. Then you have to look at food. You say, okay, doctor, diet. You have to have some ground rules there. For example, all my patients are taught you will not do well if you don't eat clean organic food, or better than organic, biodynamic, or various other systems, Korean farming. Some of these things now produce better food than classic organic farming because, as you know, organic's now kind of been washed out. But the quality of the food is important. And as you know, the food cannot be any better than the soil it came from. So you have to seek out sources for well-farmed, nutritious food, or you're going to chronically have problems and you will never be able to repair your body on a daily basis. You'll just go further and further into a deficit. And one of the things I show in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, to really drive this home, is I cite research by John Berardi, a PhD nutritionist, and he showed that it takes 55% of the calories we eat just to run the machinery of the body to get the food from mouth to anus. So if you eat 1,000 calories, 550 of those calories are just to keep the lights on in the factory running before you can spend them on your exercise, your work, your joy, your play,
Does that
your
include
kids.
your brain function? Thinking.
Well, it's not looking at brain functioning. It's looking at what does it take to digest, metabolize, assimilate, detoxify, and eliminate. So it's just running the factory of transforming food into body and eliminating waste. That's a lot of calories.
The basic process.
Survival. Right? Just the basic survival mechanisms. So, for example, people don't think about this when they go on these low-calorie diets and don't realize that they're actually putting themselves in harm's way. And what got them in trouble in the first place was that they were eating food that had such low nutrient levels in it that by the time the body runs the machinery to get it from mouth to anus, it's actually going into a nutritional deficit, right? Because you're not bringing enough nutrition to meet the factory needs, as a metaphor, right? So you're just, every meal, you're going into a hole. It's kind of like smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol too much. Your body can only repair your lungs at a certain rate and detoxify that poison at a certain rate. And your liver can only repair itself from the damage caused by alcohol and the toxicity caused by alcohol, and your brain at a certain rate. So if the intake of a toxin is greater than the body's ability to detoxify and clean itself, then you end up with a disease, is what you get. So with food, we have to consider hydration. The average person needs about half their body weight in ounces of water a day as a general rule of thumb. If you're in a metric system, you take your kilograms of body weight and multiply it by 0.033 to get liters of water a day. So if you weigh 100 kilograms, you'd need 3.3 liters of water a day.
Sure.
Okay, so that's an average. I know a lot of people have come back to me and said, oh, well, that's not accurate because, food's mostly water. I eat a lot of vegetables, meat's 70% water. That's until you cook it. And I say, well, I got news for you. Water is the chief solvent in nature. It's the chief solvent in your body. And water cannot do its work as water if there's anything in it. So everything that you just said to me has water, and it has to go through the digestive process. And that water is tied up in the food, and it's loaded with chemicals, minerals, solutes of all sorts. So my rule is if you cannot see through it, it does not count as water. Tea has to go through the digestive process. Gatorade, Coke, all these things, tea, soda pop, all of that has to go through a digestive process. So it's not actually adding the ability for your body to have clean water to neutralize toxins, dilute toxins, and remove toxins. And clean water, if it's healthy water, brings a lot of energy into your body and information that your body needs. But once you put that water in food or you put it into various things, it's not water anymore. It's now actually food. It's not water, or it may not even be food. It's chemical. It's just chemicals. And so my point is you have to have a high quality of food. You have to have a high quality of water and the right amount of water, or you'll be in big trouble, because even 1% dehydration of the central nervous system can cause significant psychological disorders. And that's well documented by Dr. Batman Gilage, who wrote the book, Your Body's Many Cries for Water. Then we have to say, well, what is it that my body specifically runs best on? As I show in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, this is all based on genetics. For example, if your mother comes from an Aboriginal, let's say, just to make it obvious, Eskimo culture, which is they eat 90% fat and protein, and your father comes from, say, a desert region where in India, or a place where they have a higher rate of vegetarianism because they don't have access to big game, you could be anything in between your mother and your father, but you're most likely to be what I call a variable type that has some degree of need for animal flesh, higher levels of saturated fat and cholesterol, and can also do fairly well with plants. But depending on the environmental stress, the internal stress, and the internal factors of the body, there's going to be, like in winter, you're going to need more fat and protein and animal foods for energy and thermogenesis to keep your body warm. But in the summer, everyone's going to need more plant foods and more water and cooling foods. For example, we all like watermelon in the summertime because it's cooling to the body. Now, if you see, I'm a what I call a polar type, because if your parents or your lineage, particularly your parents and grandparents, if they come from anywhere in the world where the ground freezes in the winter, plants do not grow in ice. So you cannot survive through the winter without eating animal flesh. And so your genetics are designed and built around that reality, because we are one with our environment. In fact, wherever your mother was at when you were in the womb, your body was made out of the molecules that came from the environment she was living in. And that's scientific fact. So your whole physiology, including your genetics, is actually heavily influenced by the epigenetic influences. Okay. So you take someone like me, see, my roots are predominantly Alsace-Lorraine, between France and Germany, which is a place that has a very significant winter. So you put a guy like me on a vegetarian diet, and it won't be long, and there's going to be real serious health problems, because people that have bodies that are more genetically driven for consuming flesh foods do not have a long enough intestinal tract and enough enzymes in their body to extract protein out of fiber. But people who come from the regions like inland aboriginals, certain regions of India, and places where there's not a lot of big game, research by Byron Robinson showed something quite fascinating. He dissected hundreds of bodies from different regions of the world, and he showed something that was quite shocking, that most people are not aware of, even medical professionals, because I've lectured on this all over the world. He measured the length of what's called the entron, which is mouth to anus, so the digestive tube from mouth to anus, and he found that amongst heavy meat-eating populations, such as the Eskimos, or native cultures that ate a lot of big game, like you would see in, say, Canada, for example, like on Vancouver Island, or where it's cold in the winter, Alaska, they often had digestive systems that were as short as 22 feet. But in regions where they ate a lot of plant foods, they had as long as 42 feet.
Yeah, wow.
So he showed that there can be twice the length, most of which is the small intestine. Well, what does that tell you? The body needs more time to extract protein out of fiber, so it lengthens the factory.
Wow, it's fascinating.
So it can pull it out, and you will see the enzyme requirements for extracting protein out of fiber from plants are a lot different than the enzyme requirements for breaking meat down. So people's bodies learn how to make and acquire enzymes to do the right processes for the foods that they're environmentally, genetically requiring. So then you start reading a bunch of diet books and eating in all sorts of ways that other people tell you to eat, but it's completely against what your body needs.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love your support by subscribing, rating and reviewing The Regenerative Journey on your favourite podcast platform. You help us reach more people and keep the show thriving for seasons to come. Each time you listen, you're choosing to make a positive shift in your own world. And if an episode speaks to you, please pass it on to friends, family or communities who might be inspired too. For more details and episodes, visit www.charliearnott.com.au.